Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Hello, dear ones. How's everybody tonight? Woo! I'm up there close. It's like I'm up there. Wow. I don't know what happened. I guess I moved my desk or my laptop or something. I just got big all of a sudden, like that girl. What was that? Alice in Wonderland, Drink Me. She got smaller and all this. Well, I don't know. But it looks like I just got real big. Let's get Steve in here and find out if Steve got big too. Hold on one second. Did you? No, we're normal size again. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just because you were on the solo
Freaked
stream by
myself
yourself.
out.
How you doing, Cisco?
I'm doing good. I freaked myself out a little bit. I'll tell you what, though. Since we talked last week, my love, we have been digging and digging and digging. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if it's groovy or far out or psychedelic or
You
what.
You mentioned Alice in Wonderland there. That's also from
One
Jefferson
pill
Airplane.
makes
There
you
you go.
smaller, and one pill makes you large. That's what I feel like I'm in tonight. I got bigger. So anyway, crazy. We are going to do Laurel Canyon. Now, Steve, this was Steve's idea. Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about what got you looking into this? And the thing that gets me is I knew parts along the way, because I'm always digging into that kind of stuff. And people say conspiracy this, conspiracy that. It's conspiracy fact. This is all highly researched. Don't believe us. Enjoy the stories. Go and look and research it for yourself for sure. Don't hang on what we're saying, but Steve is a fantastic researcher. If Steve gets a bone, he's like that old hound dog that he's not coming out of the woods till he finds it. And I'm the same way. And Steve, you mentioned Laurel Canyon and Weird Scenes, David McGowan's book, yeah?
Yeah, I started following David McGowan when it was still just a web blog. He had written on various conspiracy things and MK Ultra, and like you said, conspiracy fact. A lot of it turned out to be there was no theory there, and he had this long and winding web blog about goings on in Laurel Canyon, and everybody was always after him to make it into a book. And then one day he finally did, and it's amazing. I don't remember how many blog posts it originally comprised of. That's
I'm
all
lighting some sage.
It was probably in the hundreds.
The people that we're going to be talking about tonight, I don't know how deep. I'm going to tell the chat right now, more than likely this is going to be a two-parter because it's so deep, depending on what direction you go in. Blessings to everybody. Hang on, I don't know where my fan is, but there you go. There's a little sage smoke for everybody. We got the Palo Aloe wood here, and if you need a little Florida spritz over here, I've got that as well. I've got holy water, so we've got just about everything you need, but I'd get it all out because some of these people, with the things that they have done, the amount of fires. Now, I'm not talking about wildfires. We all know, unfortunately, that California and the valleys and, the national parks, all that has wildfires, and God bless them. It's horrible. I'm talking about the house fires that burn up after a murder to cover the evidence. Way too many.
Mysterious fires.
ODs,
in some
yes.
cases where something had happened, and again, I think it was probably not an accident, but on purpose. But
absolutely,
there's a lot of houses up in Laurel Canyon that have mysteriously burned to the ground.
Absolutely. So many things. There's the lab that Steve is we're going to talk in depth about tonight. I'm also going to link a video I was going to play it for you tonight, but I could not get the sound right on it. And rather than ruin the whole show and just screw up everything, I quit tinkering around and pushing buttons. So, but that will be in the description. And that is an actual one of those like newsreel videos, Steve, that we used to see in between the movies back in the day, like during the war, where they would have what's going on overseas, or, you know, what are our boys doing, you know, over in the Pacific. And they'd have these little newsreels. Well, this is kind of what it's like. It's actually a training film. It was done in 1967, and it states right on there only to be shown to classified personnel and all this other stuff. Well, basically, it goes through the whole narrative of this place. This lab was basically just a film studio for films, so training films, all those training films like you would see if you went into the Navy or something like that. They're showing you you know, how to use your scuba gear, and they have a training film, so they do that. Or films that were made in the 40s to, like I just said, for these newsreels and things like that. And they would have spokespeople like John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart, Marilyn Monroe, and different people going in there giving. Even Ronald Reagan went in there, did a couple of these training films. But Steve and I think that there's a whole lot more going on there. But before we get any further, I do have a video. You know, you guys know I have a video. Actually, I have a couple, because this is, again, such an extensive subject. I've put one together to give you a little idea of what the canyon looks like, what the homes look like then and now. Who are some of the people that came up in this this time, this summer of love, and all of the music coming out of the canyon, as that, so to speak. Well, here's the flip flop, Steve. Most people think, if you ask people, where was the hippie movement born? Where did all this music come out of in the 60s, and the protests against the war, the folk songs, the protest songs, and everything else? You'd say what?
Most
Haight
people will
Ashbury.
say Haight Ashbury, but that's incorrect. It was a
That's
lot
incorrect.
further south in Laurel Canyon.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But if you think about it, everything that was pushed was Haight Ashbury. Now, my sister lived in Venice, on Venice Beach for a while, and you know, was down there during that time and scene. And she had just come out of Vietnam War, like fresh out of Saigon. Tell you the truth, she was in the Navy. She was a photographer, and very much like her truck driver sister, got to see. You know, even they said women, no women in combat. Let me tell you, if they want you for something, they're gonna find a way to get you in there. And she was like that too. And when she came out of that, she wound up in that life, that whole you know, everybody was living together, everybody was hanging out. You know, you might have an apartment and you have two roommates. Well, you come in there one night, you got 20 people. Funny story that actually happened, the way things moved this way, not to jump ahead, but this is the kind of stuff that's coming, is Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. He's, you know, just a normal teenage surfer kid. I think there was only one of the Beach Boys that actually surfed. I think it was
It
him.
was him,
It was him.
and he also drowned under mysterious circumstances.
There you go.
That was weird.
Again, it's going to pile up. The evidence is just so deep. It's amazing. You need
Yeah,
waiters.
interesting story about him. He was driving his, I think it was a Ferrari or something, some kind of expensive car through Laurel Canyon, picked up a couple girls hitchhiking,
Yep, this is it. Yep, go
and
ahead.
brought them back and let him stay at his house for a while.
Yep.
Well, it turns out it was two of the girls from the Manson family.
Mhm.
And within just a few days, the entire family had moved, including Charlie, had moved into Dennis Wilson's mansion. And it
Mhm.
got so bad to the point that he actually
He moved
rented
out.
another house and moved out and let them
He moved
stay
out.
there.
Yep, and it said that who was telling the story that I saw? I think it was his cousin, the tall, skinny guy that sang up front. Was his name Mike or something? But anyway, I don't know the Beach Boys that well. But he said that, and he put it in his book, that everything Steve says 100% true, except what he did was he picked up these girls and showed them where he lived, and they weren't staying with him or anything. He leaves, he goes out of town. He's out of town for a week doing a show, comes back, and they have moved in and brought Charles Manson and half the family with them, and he couldn't get rid of them. And like Steve said, he moved out. He rented another house and moved out and just gave it to him. And that's what went on back then. People sang the praises. Neil Young thought Charles Manson and his music was just amazing. He had stated that he was definitely a songwriter, but he was less of a singer than he was uh, a spitter of truth. I think the kids call it now. When they're rapping and they're just spitting out facts and stuff, and that appealed to these to everybody there. So that's just another everything connected kind of thing. Before we go any further, I'd love to say hi to these wonderful people in chat. Last night, Steve, we had on Rob Guttrow, and we did the three spirits he met at Christmas time when he went to go see, believe it or not, the Christmas Carol at Ford's Theater. And while he was there, he met three ghosts that night. One was in the audience and wouldn't leave him alone while he was trying to watch it. One bumped into him while he was at intermission out in the lobby. And one before the play, he met in the gift shop when he was, unbeknownst to him, he turned around and looked, and he was in a corner of nothing but John Wilkes Booth memorabilia. And sure enough, the ghost of John Wilkes Booth showed up. And he said he was extremely arrogant and thought what he had done was the greatest feat of his life. And that's why he was hanging out there. So very interesting night last night. But I didn't get to say hi to all my wonderful people here in this chat, all these great gatekeepers. Are you kidding me? Hello, welcome in, Brown Dwarf. Welcome in. We got, is that Teddy? I can't tell if, I'm sorry, with my eyes, I can't tell if that is an I or an L.
Looks like Teddy Morella.
There it is. Hi, Teddy. How you doing, love? Maraid, Carol, XO, love you. Paradox, how you doing? We got Donnie. Hi, Donnie. And we are going to get to your question, which Steve and I were just talking about that. Jeanette, hey, honey, how you doing? I know I got my wonderful mods in here. Has anybody seen Patriot? I hadn't seen Patriot in a while. Uncommon Belief is here. Hello, Gray. Laura, hello. Steve, do you see anybody in there? Glenn, hi, hon. PETA?
I saw Jeanette Sanchez, Paradox Fossils, Mrs. VSNCO09.
Welcome.
Who else here? Let me scroll backwards a little bit.
Somebody's tickling somebody in here,
PETA,
Steve.
PETA.
I don't know what's going on. Are y'all tickling each other? As long as it's consensual tickling, I don't mind. Go right ahead. We'll just keep on going on with the story. How about you, Steve? I don't care.
I'm fine with that. Glenn Dennis is here. Miss Jarvis, Grey Wolf, Paranormal, Laura Elizabeth. Fine looking crowd tonight.
They're getting started already, Steve. I don't know what this night holds, but I think it's going to be a doozy, don't you?
Yeah, slow motion's here. Anybody that I missed?
Chris,
hello,
did I miss you,
everyone.
Chris? Hi, sweetie. How you doing? Great, wonderful. So, Greg brought in some good news the other night. Apparently, what had happened was shipping on small things is really bad in Canada. Apparently, if you get more than one thing, it's not as bad. But we know that that's always been famous for shipping out. Is usually costs more, and I'm so sorry about that. I absolutely have no. If I had anything, I'd do free shipping for everybody, but I don't have anything to do with it. That's all TeePublic. But good news, she said she got a black T-shirt. She picked one of the episode. Not episode art, one of the gatekeeper art designs that I did for you guys, and she got it on a black T-shirt, Steve, and said that it came in great. Used to, when they first started, they would have to put an extra plate, I guess, under for color shield or something to make it pop, to make the colors pop on the black, but I guess that they've gotten better at that, so good news there.
Good deal.
Great. So everybody who's getting T-shirts and hoodies, I know Patriot was waiting on a hoodie. I've gotten some mugs and everything else, and they're fantastic. They look absolutely fabulous. I know I'm a little close that you guys can't see, but it's a mug. It's got a handle, and it holds hot or cold things, and you can hold it in either hand. It's ambidextrous. You can hold it in your right hand or your left, and I'm holding it right now and smoking a cigarette, and I'm having no problem whatsoever. So it appears to be a very well-functioning mug, Steve.
Yeah, keeps the cold liquids cold, the hot liquids hot. Now, how does it know?
How does it know? It's so smart.
As,
Oh, that's good. Oh, it's the little things that are the funniest, aren't they?
yeah.
Hey, Glenn, Glenn's spouting something here. Hang on, let's get this up here before we get rolling and we miss it. What is that? Can you see that, Steve? We're both so
Uh,
old we can't see nothing.
Shane and Ryan from BuzzFeed Unsolved have this thing where they get drunk and read holiday season ghost stories. You
I'm
two
down.
can do the same thing. Yeah,
I'll
pick a
get me
pick
some
a
Mrs.
day.
McGee moonshine and some bacon caramel popcorn, and I'll read till I pass out. I'll do it. Just know that I can hang a while and I'm sitting down to start, so you might be in for a long show. All right, so let's go ahead and take a real quick look at these wonderful, beautiful what'd you call it last week? Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Yep.
Get you some Gatekeeper, a sticker, a notebook. I wish they had socks. I'd get socks. But or a pillow, a crispy pillow to hug. I got new vintage
Or
designs too.
one
I
of
did
those
another.
mugs with artificial intelligence.
Right, right. Get you one of those ambidextrous mugs because, like I said, left or right handed, it just, it's equal drinking for everybody. Here we go. For my gatekeepers. Ask drunk questions. Enjoy the journey, right, Steve?
Indeed.
I mean, you might as well. It's hard, they're going to drag you down. Somehow your spirit guides will drag you through your journey. And it's, a whole lot harder when you're kicking and screaming. Hey, Casey, welcome in. I love these totes. Now, a lot of people, like when I go to Little's, they don't have bags. You got to bring your own bags now. It's crazy. I think Trader Joe's is like that too, yeah? So I've got a nice big one, and they print it on both sides for the same price, so you might as well get it with their Holy Shirt guarantee. So if you don't like it, send it back, and they'll give it another whack. So there you go, guys. Thank you so much for everybody who's picked some. Some people in here said they got a couple. I know Jackie did, a couple different mugs and stuff like that. She seemed to be real pleased with them too. So thank you very much. Every little bit helps to goes towards the StreamYard and everything else. Also, please hit the like. It helps so much with the algorithms and getting those videos out, for everybody. And also, we also are monetized, and we have, if you're feeling like in the holiday gift giving spirit, hit that $ down there and put up your message. But you don't have to pay for questions here, Steve. Not in the least. We just have to be able to see them, right, Steve?
Questions are free. It's the answers that you have to
Jeanette says she is a big mug lover and can probably get a few and gift them. Thank you so much. It would be great, maybe hand write out your favorite ghost story and put it inside the mug with some candy, or maybe get a tumbler and put some of Mrs. McGee moonshine in there. I mean, I'll tell you what, that's good hot or cold. Even the frozen one is good but it goes fast. You don't realize what you're drinking, and you forget you're drinking whiskey and vodka together, and woo. It's got a little kick.
Dangerous combination there. And I just want to say happy birthday to Jeanette. She had a birthday just the other day.
Happy birthday, dear heart. Happy birthday.
I think she's probably 18 now, something like that.
Something like that. Any of the mods that are in tonight, I'm sorry, I can't tell on my screen who my mods are tonight. We got Grey Wolf, we got Laura, No Uncommon Belief is in here. If you guys could drop the TeePublic link, that would be great. I appreciate it. There's a couple Jeanette's asking for the link, so thank you very much for asking about that. There's a lot of good stuff in there. All right, so without further ado, this is such a deep subject in so many different avenues. We're going to start. Steve is going to kick us off and start after this little video here, but I thought it would be a really good idea to watch a little bit of a video, listen to a little music. I can't play all the music that came out of there. California Dreamin', Old Man Neil Young, all the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, The Doors, Jackson Brown, Joni Mitchell. I mean, I could keep going. That came out of there because we'll get copyright strike. But you can at least look and see what it looked like then, some of the things that happened, some of the people that were there, and have a little bit more of a visual to go along with some of these stories, okay? Oh, Jeanette says she's 20. She's 28. She's 28. So without further ado, here's a little video for you guys. Here you go. Right next to the lab, Steve.
Mhm.
The Eagles. How many albums? Troubadours. I wore that Jackson Browne album out, boy. Running on Empty. Woo! Wore it out. Linda Ronstadt. What a set of pipes she had. James Taylor. Dylan. And there's the Morrisons. We got some stories on them, don't we, Steve?
Just a couple.
Think this was all organic? Think again. Rest in peace, Dave. You did good, kiddo. So many secrets. Now this is Ramon Navarro. He was found beaten to death in 1968 on Halloween night by two men. One was 21, one was 17. So from Houdini to Zappa, this town's been kicking. I remember when Art Linkletter's daughter Diane jumped off the roof. They tried to say she had LSD in her system. The autopsy was clean. Then you've got the Manson family who busted into a house rented by Sharon Tate. And you got Helter Skelter. The next day, it was Leo and Rosemary LaBianca who were butchered in their home just blocks away from the Tate house. Then you've got the Wonderland murders.
4 on the floor murders. Boy, those were hideous.
4 on the floor with Johnny the Wad Holmes. He got in a little too deep, didn't he?
Yep.
Oh, did I say that? And there's Liberace and what they called his pet, Scott Thorson. And Scott was actually a witness to the 4 on the floor murders. 4 people died. One was left she survived, but she was damaged so badly for life, obviously. They were beaten to death with serrated pipes. Well, there you guys go. That's just a little bit. The reason I put Ramon Navarro, a lot of these murders, one of the things that murders or deaths or supposed ODs, a lot of the number one favorite, I'm sorry, there you go. A lot of the number one favorite way of saying it was murder-suicide or, an OD, of course. And then the autopsies would come up much like Art Linkletter's daughter. I remember them coming on TV. It was so horrible. You'd see him at the funeral crying, like back when they used to do in the day. You'd see a little bit of a group shot and a reporter saying basically that, of course, they were heartbroken and that they said that she died from an OD of LSD, which is strange, but that she thought she could fly and that's why she jumped off the roof and, of course, died on impact. And the autopsy came up clean. She had no drugs in her system. So what went on there? Also with Ramon Navarro, he like obviously he was living a secret life. He was trying to hide the fact that he was gay, which was a lot going on in those times, because that was back in the late 20s. He was a silent film star, very much like um, oh, what was his name, Rudolph Valentino. And he was very much like that. But so he used to get male prostitutes. Well, in this case, a male prostitute that had been there the week before handed off Ramon's address, and two guys showed up that night, and he was absolutely beaten to a pulp, and found a bloody mess on the floor by his valet chauffeur that came in the next morning. It was all hidden away. It took many years to uncover everything else. It was just said that he died of natural causes.
which resulted from being beaten to death.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
that natural death of being beaten. And then
Right.
you have other murders like that. Sal Mineo
Yes.
from Rebel Without a Cause.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
finding
All
an
of them.
actor beaten to death.
Him, Natalie, even though she drowned, if she was part of that whole crowd, because you had the Young Turks. That was that whole group was okay. So it was Warren Beatty. It was oh gosh,
Dennis Hopper.
Yes, yes. All
James
those.
Dean.
Mhm,
There's all kinds of wild
Sal
stories
Mineo,
about him and
Natalie
stuff
Wood.
that he was into.
All of them. And what I heard too, I could be wrong in this, but I had heard, I've been listening to a lot of the Dave McGowan interviews, and he had stated that, let's see, many of the young men stars actually started out as prostitutes, male prostitutes. And that whole thing, Rizzo the Rat, and it was Dennis Hoffman, and was it young John Voight that played in Midnight Cowboy?
Yeah.
That whole thing, even though it was done in New York, was based on a lot of Dennis Hopper's and James Dean and Sal Mineo, of course, being a young gay male, and also trying to do work
Tab
to,
Hunter was in that group.
right,
There were
to
several
get
of
that
them.
out. Yeah, and they all were they started off as male prostitutes and stuff like that. So it was just really awful. I remember being a teen, being coming up, going to high school, and of course all that stuff. You got Fleetwood Mac and all those things, and I was listening to a lot of different stuff. But you would be lying if you said that an Eagles song did strike a memory chord with you, or a Neil Young, or Jackson Brown, or Joni Mitchell, or Carole King, or James Taylor. I mean, they really were all interwoven in our lives, even as young as we were back then, Steve. We were just getting into becoming teenagers when all this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Young, I was like 11, 12. I can remember listening to some of this stuff just coming out. So that was what was going on in the back end of this. I don't know what was happening with a lot of the silent film stars seem to want to go off into the Laurel Canyon. Wasn't very far from Hollywood. It's not very far from the Hollywood sign, is it, Steve?
No, it's just right there. Bela Lugosi lived a couple different places in Laurel Canyon. Some of your other,
Houdini,
yeah,
Tom
Houdini
Mix.
had that huge estate there, which is purportedly haunted.
Yep.
There had been murders and stuff there before Houdini lived in it, and there were tunnels that supposedly went under the road to Tom Mix's place from the Houdini place. It was just all right there together.
Right. And that cabin that Steve is talking about, the Tom Mix, who was a very famous cowboy, kind of a singing cowboy kind, when all that was coming out, they were doing the rope-a-dopes and different rope tricks and things like that. Of course, cowboy, all that stuff came out real big with the Rifleman and Lone Ranger and all that. It was huge in the coming up late 40s, early 50s into the 60s. Honestly, with Marshall Dillon and all that other stuff. That stuff was big. Bonanza, all these shows, they were huge in the West. So Tom Mix was big, Roy Rogers, all of that ilk together. But Tom Mix had this great big thing called the cabin, and it was actually almost 5 stories, a huge, sprawling. This was no little cabin. This was huge. And the way everything was built in this canyon, everything was odd, angled because you had to go up, and I mean up. Think if you've seen some of these houses that were on the beach, so you have to go up wooden stairs and turn and go up more to get up
Mhm.
on these houses on stilts. This is very much what this was like. You can't park on the street. A lot of people walked, which is why you had all of that walking back and forth to everybody's house. It was kind of like Mardi Gras, how everybody goes from one place to another and carries their drinks and goes in and out and just goes down the whole block and in and out. That's the way Laurel Canyon was, because everybody lived there. Everybody in this time lived there. But the odd thing was, is they're next to this lab where all this kind of weird stuff is going on. People are saying they're doing filming, training films. Why would you have to shoot film out in Germany and then ship it all the way to Laurel Canyon Labs to have film processed? Now, that doesn't sound right, does it, Steve?
No, not a bit. Hey, no justice, no peace. Welcome in, sweetheart.
Hello, how you doing? Well, if you want to start with the lab, what do you want to tell us about that, Steve? I mean,
Well, it was at that time it was the biggest and busiest motion picture lab in the world,
mhm,
and yet most of the movies that were made there, nobody ever saw them.
mhm,
It was propaganda films, training films,
yep,
and according to rumors, they did a lot of the MK Ultra
mhm,
stuff there as well. Films that the CIA used for mind control programming.
mhm, mhm,
And like Cisco mentioned, every big Hollywood star was in and out there, usually more than once. Yeah, John Wayne, Ronald Reagan, Marilyn Monroe, just a whole
Jimmy
a
Stewart,
list of everybody. Yeah, there was
Henry
anybody.
Fonda, Henry Fonda as
And
well. Yep.
a lot of them thought they were doing it for the war effort until they got in there and found out kind of what they'd been duped into doing. And by then, you couldn't talk about it, and they just had to make make peace with themselves.
hmm hmm And also, you have people coming out, much like we do now with stars saying this or that, or people like Mel Gibson coming out and telling you what's been going on in Hollywood, and then you wonder why people don't come out and say things. A lot. You have to think about the times, what was going on. You've got the war going on. Really, we were involved in the war from about 61. I think we started with advisors. So we actually had people in there that called themselves advisors. They're basically soldiers, CIA, FBI, special troops in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. Um, that was one of those wars that never really was declared, but we were constantly in it and trying to, it seemed like our government and the machine that drives these wars and makes money on both sides of it was really pushing to get this war heated up. So you started to, at that time, see this influx of these young people going into Laurel Canyon. And I can remember in the 90s, late 90s, I think it was, when George Carlin was doing one of his sit down talks. And he was kind of getting in depth, but you know how Carlin always kind of talked. Thank you, Oracles Beyond, for sharing. I appreciate that. Um, that he said he never quite was into hanging out with the Laurel Canyon group, and he says, the way he said it, and I quote, "And I damn sure didn't go up that mountain. People who went up that mountain came back down. They weren't the same."
Yep.
So there's a lot of truth in a short
Gordon
amount.
Dennis was asking the name of the official name was Lookout Mountain Air Force Station,
Yep. Hey, Patriot,
but
welcome in. We were
it
just asking about you.
was a film lab and a film studio,
hmm
and it's at the top of Lookout Mountain Drive there in
hmm
the canyon.
Yep. I wish I
And
could have got that film going, because
that's
the propaganda film that they did for that, it looks so squeaky clean. So as hard as they tried to make it look squeaky clean, Steve, it makes me,
it makes it look even.
wonder, what are they
He
hiding?
thinks they do protest too much.
Right. And to be that close to that base, and I'm talking just, like it's in your backyard. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, why are we suspicious? Well, we're suspicious because you have people like Timothy Leary, who was self professed, worked for the CIA.
Mhm.
You had one of the biggest drug dealers out there that everybody talked about, that everybody knew. And it called himself Bear. Also worked for the CIA and an FBI informant. So back and forth, back and forth. And they never got pinched. Okay. None of these people that lived in there ever really got any kind of hard drug fines. If they did get caught with drugs, it would always be moved down to a misdemeanor, or they get a slap on the wrist. Nobody was ever, with all the amount of drugs out there and the amount of things. You could walk into the cabin where Frank Zappa lived, and you're bumping into Mick Jagger, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. You're bumping into all these people that just moved in and stayed. Now, Frank Zappa didn't like drugs, but in everybody else's house, there'd be coke all over the place. Heroin was prevalent. Of course, marijuana, but it was illegal at the time. So nobody's getting any drug charges. Nobody's getting busted. That doesn't seem right. Here's another thing, Steve. Not
Mhm.
one of them went to the Vietnam War. All
Yeah.
military age. Not one of them got charged for draft dodging. Not
Didn't get a
one of
draft notice. None of them were drafted.
nothing. Now explain that.
And
How
then
did
you
that
look at
happen?
that picture there that you showed. You had it titled "The Morrisons," like it was
Hmm.
from a TV show or something.
Yep.
That was Admiral Morrison on board his ship, the Bon Homme,
Yep.
with a very young, not that young, but probably in his mid-teens,
Yep.
Jim Morrison.
Yep.
Very clean cut, very collegiate looking. Nothing like he would look within just a few short years.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
basically, his dad was
Let me see if I can find
he caused, let's put it that way,
hmm.
or was involved with the Bay of Tonkin incident,
Hmm.
which actually was what drew us into Vietnam.
Exactly.
The
He was
war.
the admiral in charge of the fleet of ships that was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident, where supposedly North Vietnamese attacked our ships and killed a bunch of guys. We had basically Johnson screaming, "I've got boys in the water. I got boys in the water, for the love of God," to get the war heated up and get things started again. And absolutely has come back and said, never happened. Never happened. And that was Jim Morrison's father. And we have a picture here, I promise. It's right about here, I think. Yep, right about here. But this is little Jim. Now, Jim used to go around and tell everybody that his parents were dead. Okay, you
Mhm.
see where this thing is right here, where you can see the yellow circle? Right on the other side of that to the right, you can see where it says the observatory, and that's where the lab is. That's how close, right here, Laurel Canyon, for everybody who wants to see that map. Let me see, where is Jim and his daddy? Should be right here. There it is.
This
I
past,
think. Was it? Did I pass that one? I thought it was toward the end here. The Morrisons. I don't know. But anyway, his dad was not just an admiral in charge of that, but was the youngest admiral to be in charge of a fleet. Made
yeah, there
history.
there was Jim on. Looked like he's wearing a Letterman jacket or something
Yeah, he did.
on the bridge of this boat with his father, who was the admiral. And but yeah, Jim never spoke out about the war. That was the
Mm-mm.
interesting thing.
Hmm.
And in fact, pretty much that whole side of that counterculture, while they were not very in favor of the war, they never really spoke out about it that much, any of those
Right.
people.
Well, that
And
was the weird thing about it, though.
another strange thing, every single one of those kids had parents
Hmm.
that were, if not directly in the military, were part of the military industrial complex.
100%. Thank you so much, Be Kind. And she sent us a super chat. Thank you so much. She says here, so important that this history is not forgotten. Thank you so much, Be Kind. Well, that's what we're trying to do. I mean, I had an idea, but I had no idea it went this deep. And what Steve just said, I want you to think about. Now, I don't have the whole rundown of everybody and who they were connected to. But you've got David Crosby, who's still alive, and his lineage. You know, you look at him, and he looks like a poster child for, anti-war, anti-gun, anti-violence. Make love, not war. For sure. He keeps no holds barred about smoking pot or the heroin and things he went through. Most of the people won't talk to him from that time because of those things. He has direct lineage to Alexander Hamilton and John Jay.
Yeah, and people, a few years ago were wondering why that he was big in demand for people having in vitro fertilization.
His sperm. They wanted his sperm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the lady's name.
Melissa Etheridge.
Yeah, Melissa Etheridge and her partner wanted
and
him
her
to
wife.
be their baby daddy.
Mm-hmm.
And people
They
were
said
saying,
it was for
what is it
musicians.
about him? He's not very attractive.
Mm-hmm.
He has, a lot of problems, a lot of history, negative history.
Yep.
But it's the lineage. It's one of the bloodlines. His full name is David Van Cortlandt Crosby.
Yep.
And you look up the Van Cortlandts, particularly in New England and in that area, there was some. That's a deep, dark rabbit hole to go down. There's even a Van Cortlandt Park in New York that's linked to the Son of Sam murders and where those people met. So
absolutely,
that's why.
But it's every single one. It's every single one. And the way Jim went about how he explained, like I briefly touched on, where he would say his parents were dead. If you listen, I knew a lot about Jim Morrison because my first husband just idolized him. The first gift I ever bought him was that poster of Jim in the denim blue T-shirt with the blue love beads around his neck, and he used to call him believe it or not, he hung it in the bathroom. He said, well, he was a shithead. So, that's just the way my ex was. But anyway, he used to talk about the lyrics, and people talk about how deep that stuff was. Have you ever read the lyrics? I mean, it's just, the water is wet and the river is wet and, the creek is wet too. It's just water. Yeah. It's crazy. But the way it was is he was supposed to have written 3 years worth of music and can't read music. Okay. There was a lot of talent in that band. But again, if you start picking apart bands, we'd lightly touched on it last time. Steve, we were talking about Milli Vanilli. Remember we brought that up? We said, I don't know why people got so upset because it's been going on forever with these bands who didn't play instruments. Frank Zappa had a nanny, well, not kind of sort of a nanny for their oldest daughter, I believe. Moon Unit was born like a couple weeks after Zappa got married to Gail. So they had like a nanny. Well, she had a friend who was writing a book or, like a journalism, whatever, report for a newspaper or magazine. So she stayed there for a couple weeks to get to know Zappa. Zappa was very against drugs. He was very much like, think of a Prince type. The way his mind worked, almost like autist, like an autist almost, because he was just so brilliant. He couldn't quiet things in his head. He didn't eat at the dinner table. Gail didn't cook. Everybody just scrounged around and got what they wanted. And if they did have a holiday meal or something like that, he'd come and get a plate and go back in the cellar or go back in the studio. But the thing he used to get mad about the most is the Mothers of Invention. He said, these guys can't read music. These guys can't play the instruments. I have to teach them one bar at a time. He said, this is making me insane. And you wonder, it begs to wonder, it's like where all these musicians came from. Half of them couldn't play instruments, Steve.
Yeah. And they talked about that with Morrison. He had been to film school at UCLA where he met Ray Manzarek. Jim had dropped out of film school because one of his projects got ridiculed. And like a few days later, weeks later, whatever, he met Manzarek on the beach, and he was like, hey, let's start a band. And he's like, do you play anything? Do you sing? And he's like, well, no, but I've got a notebook full of poetry. And basically what he had in his notebook was the first 3 Doors albums.
There you go.
He had never sang, ever, not even, in school or anything. He'd never been any part of a band. He had never had anything to do with anything musically. and then within just a few months, he was the lead singer for the biggest rock band in the world at that time.
Right. And now, see, it's starting to create a pattern, is it not? Because you think you got the Monkees. Well, the Monkees were brought together because they had the TV show and the idea and the script and all that stuff before they had the band. So
The
they hired
Prefab
these
Four.
guys
Mhm.
to fit parts.
A couple
And
of them could play. Peter Tork was a
Mike,
good folk
yep,
musician, and
yep,
Mike Nesmith, whose mother
yep,
invented Whiteout,
Whiteout.
and that's where his fortune came from.
Hmm.
He could play.
Hmm.
But Mickey Dolenz, he had been
Yep,
circus boy on television
yep.
in a short-lived black and white show, and Davy Jones had been like an understudy for the British version of Broadway with Anthony Newley and
Oh
people like
yeah. Oh, I
that.
loved Anthony
So
Newley. Oh my God, I love him.
Davy could sing, but there's a lot of people that tried out for the Monkees
Hmm.
and didn't make it. And somewhere I've seen the ad that they ran in Daily Variety there in Hollywood when they were casting for the Monkees, like um, specifically mentioned a Ben Franks type must come down for an interview, and it was all like drug related stuff. Ben Franks was a place on the
Hmm.
strip where people used to go to cop drugs, and then must come down for an interview, meaning you had to not quite be so high when you came in for an interview. But
Hmm.
some of the people that tried out and did make it was Stephen Stills.
Hmm.
He didn't make it because he had bad teeth.
Hmm.
Um, Charles Manson
Hmm.
tried out for the Monkees, but he was too short. They already had the short one, which
Hmm.
was Davy. So
Isn't that crazy? But you see how everybody's interwoven here. And that's what I said in that little video is, do you think all this happened organically? Like, okay, maybe it was cheaper rent and all of these people just naturally, were pulled to go to California in that one spot. And then they all just happened to play guitars and be songwriters. And then everybody just got together and started playing off each other, and bing, bang, boom. You had this huge just movement
mhm.
of tune in, turn off, tune drop out, and all this other stuff.
Turn on,
Basically,
tune in,
tune
drop
in,
out.
there you go.
Timothy Leary.
Yeah, there you go. And Timothy Leary, like I said, worked for the CIA, pushing
Mhm.
LSD, trying to get everybody to do this LSD. We also know that not at almost overlapping and a little bit before, you had that whole MK Ultra thing going on, where they admitted that they were giving, um, dropping even their own agents, CIA and otherwise, LSD without their knowledge, and then videotaping them with prostitutes and things like that. You had that one guy that jumped out the window. Remember, Steve?
Mhm.
They've done multiple movies on this. All of this was intertwined. So you've got your lab where this mysterious stuff is going on, supposedly filming propaganda videos. Then you've got Laurel Canyon right there with everybody moving in and living there, going in and out of everybody's house. Of course, everybody's sleeping with everybody else. I don't know, James Taylor and
Oh, there
you
was
got,
big party houses
yeah.
there. Mama Cass from the Mamas and the
Hmm.
Papas, they said that was like a 24-hour party
Yep.
there
Yep.
all the
Yep.
time.
And
And
she
another
refused to
one,
clean, by the way. Her house was so bad that Michelle went in one day and cleaned it and left. She spent 4 hours cleaning the place and left and never told Mama Cass because she refused to pick up anything. But that's just the way it was then, you
and
know?
another really surprising one to me was Peter Tork of the Monkees. He
Hmm.
seemed so wholesome and
Yeah.
so all American and everything. He had at least half a dozen girls living with him at any
Hmm.
particular time, and he
Peter.
was another one of those that had the 24-hour party house where you could come up, you could show, had a place to do your drugs, party, hang out, stay
Hmm.
as long as you wanted.
Yep. But nobody ever got busted. And
Mhm.
nobody ever did any time. Nobody got drafted. Nobody got any kind of medical, like, where they were unfit to serve. And listen, like I said, I was a young, gosh, in '68. I can, like I said, I remember on the news when Art Linkletter's daughter jumped off the roof of the building. Everybody was talking about it. These poor kids and their LSD. These drugs are just so bad, and they are in every decade. But to have that group of kids, all of the military children. I mean, most of these people knew each other. Many of them went to the same kindergarten or the same army-based school in Germany. Several of them went to get to school there because all their parents were in the military, and they all had prestigious positions in the military as far as army intelligence or these type of things. Like, look at Morrison's dad.
Yeah. Oh,
What
Frank
are the
Zappa.
chances?
Frank
Yes.
Zappa grew up
Hmm. Yes,
on
he
the
did.
Edgewood Arsenal. His
Hmm.
father worked in chemical warfare at
Hmm.
Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland, and just
Frank
all
Zappa.
these kids. And
Hmm.
Frank Zappa, is that not what I said? That's who it
Yeah.
meant to say.
No,
Okay.
you did. You said
Okay.
Frank Zappa. No, I was just
But
saying that that's the
the
way it was,
thing,
and they want you to think that all these kids are just sick of their parents and hated the military and gathered, with that common factor. But that's not what they were portraying at the
mm,
time. It just doesn't make sense.
no,
Go ahead.
and there was no music industry in Southern California at that
Mm-mm.
time.
No.
Everything was in New York. You had Tin
Yep.
Pan Alley, you had the Brill Building. If
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to make it in music, New York was where you had to go for pop music and things like that. And then you could go to Detroit or Chicago, somewhere like that for R&B,
Uh-huh.
down south for the blues. But there was nothing in
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles. And then here, all of a sudden, this entire movement springs up, and they all just headed west from wherever they were. Read the story about Neil Young. He was just hanging out in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and he said that one day he got an idea in his head. He's like, I've got to go to California and be in a band with
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Stills.
Mm-hmm.
So it just popped into his head. So he loads up an old hearse he has,
Yep.
drives it straight from some Canada
Mm-hmm.
to Hollywood, is driving down Hollywood Boulevard, and he's thinking, now, if I were Stephen Stills, where would I be? Happens to see him pass by in another
Mm-hmm.
car, does a U-turn on Hollywood Boulevard on like a Friday afternoon, which to me, that's the most unbelievable part of the story, that you could do a U-turn on Hollywood Boulevard in a hearse. But anyway,
That's true.
caught him, followed him, got him to pull over, and like, hey, I'm Neil Young. We're supposed to be in a band together.
Yep.
And Steve was like, well, come on, let's see what you got. And there's Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Yep.
There you go.
Is amazing. Is amazing. Now the chat here is talking about David Cassidy. I can assure you that David Cassidy was no part whatsoever of the Laurel Canyon group. I had his poster on my wall from the age of about 10 on through. I think I didn't tear it down till I went to junior high school. He was clean cut and just wonderful. Did a wonderful show in Vegas and went out without without any kind of scandal. I'm joking, of course. I love David Cassidy. I was a David Cassidy Partridge Family girl when I was young, but I never heard anything too much about him except that I think he dated the girl Susan Day that was on there or something, and it
Yeah.
was the Brady
He
Bunch that
was,
was up in all the hubbub and the horrors
yeah,
over there.
they had a lot of stuff going on.
Partridge Family was just fine.
Greg dated the mom, and supposedly the dad
Yep.
tried to hit on Greg, and
Yeah. Ooh.
it
Yeah.
just makes you wonder, when I'm going to go upstairs and check on the boys.
Hmm.
Like,
Yep. Be careful. You better knock on that door before you open it. Didn't they? Weren't they the first ones to have a bathroom? You didn't see a toilet, but you first ones to have the bathroom on
I've
national
wondered
TV.
about that house. The guy's an architect,
I
and he's
know.
got one
One
bathroom
bathroom.
for 6 kids. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah,
all
I
there.
don't get it either. I don't get it either. I was trying to catch what they were saying here. Yep. We all had the posters all over our room. I remember at the time it was Tiger Beat magazine and something else, and I couldn't always afford all of it, so I had to pick real careful. But back then it was either Donny Osmond or Leif. No, I think Leif Garrett came later, but it was Donny Osmond or David Cassidy, and I was David Cassidy all the way. So
No.
there's that. But yeah, back to them. That was one of the weirdest things is you just think, and the way they put it out at that time, if the chat can remember, if you're an old gal like me, you can think back to how it all seemed. It seemed like they were trying to feed us that it was organic, that they were military. If it came out that they had any military in their family, it was that they were so sick of the establishment and they were turning their backs on the government, the whole thing. But it was basically what's happening now. If you wanted those floppy leather hats sold, you stuck it on somebody's head. The next thing you know, everybody wants that floppy hat. It just took longer for it to hit the mainstream, right, Steve? Like it was all in the magazines. It was in Rolling Stone magazine, Cream, Mad, like I said, Tiger Beat, Sweet 16, all of these different magazines. And that's, or on the album covers. That was it. And you'd be surprised who else is involved. Steve mentioned Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Well, everybody remembers that iconic logo, right, Steve? Where you've got all the letters combined into one, where it looks like that. That's their famous logo. It's on all of their albums, whether it was Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young or just Crosby, Stills and Nash, they still used it. The person who put that together, not too long ago, the name just went pop. Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman. Think back now. Phil Hartman was pretty much comedian, kind of mediocre actor. He's in and out popping in and out of those movies. Supposedly he died in some kind of cocaine infused blitz with his wife, murder-suicide, right?
Supposedly, but I don't buy that for a minute.
He's the one that designed that logo. He used to do album covers. He did several album covers for this group, and he was all part of it too. So there's so many mysterious deaths with this. I was actually going to do a roll of the deaths just in the 10-year decade between the 60s, maybe 68 to 78 or 66 to 76. The murders are so many. There's so many deaths. It is absolutely phenomenal. If you remember, does anybody remember the farmer's daughter? Her name is Inger Stevens.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look up her picture, she's a beautiful little blonde. I can remember her, the show Farmer's Daughter, and her popping in and out of different movies and stuff like that. This poor girl had a roommate. Her death went down as a suicide. Well, she had a fresh gash on her chin. She had cuts and bruises all over her body, and supposedly she took a lot of barbiturates, very Marilyn Monroe-ish. And her roommate walked in when she was on the floor. She said she opened her eye and lifted her head just a little bit, tried to say something, then collapsed. And she was DOA before she reached the hospital. Mm-hmm. Now, did she beat herself up and bust her chin wide open and go in the bathroom? She had a fresh Band-Aid on it. So if you're committing suicide, why are you bothering to go in the bathroom and put a Band-Aid on your chin?
Yeah.
None of this makes any sense, but she had no reason to kill herself. She had a brand new show coming up. She was very excited about, but this is one after the other, after the other, after the other. And then you have these mass murders like, on Cielo Drive with the Tate LaBianca murders, and that's insane, Steve. About Charlie Manson and everything, and how deep and ingrained he was in this society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was another one of those. I think it was Neil Young. They referred to him as the Wizard. That he was so taken with. In fact, all of the band was. And they were trying to help him get a record deal because they liked what he was doing. Mm-hmm. You can even read interviews where hear them talking about the Wizard. That was Manson that they were talking about.
Exactly.
He met a lot of people. He met the Beatles. He met, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. When they went out to California, they hung out, where do you think? Laurel Canyon. Mm-hmm. And Charlie was at some of the parties they were at. That's how he got so taken with the Beatles, and because that was the whole thing that he came up with, where the Beatles represented the four horsemen of the apocalypse and all this other stuff, and that was what was going to bring Helter Skelter down. He listened to the White Album back to back to back to back over and over so many times, and that was where he prophesied from all this that was going happened.
Helter Skelter, I think Little Piggies too, right? And
Mhm.
that's why they wrote in blood on the wall, Helter Skelter and pigs and all that other stuff. But, and, Charlie basically told him to do that. But Donnie said here, real quick, my father actually named me after Donnie Osmond. Secret's out now, Donnie. Okay. I'll never be able to unknow that now for some reason. That's funny. But yeah, that was the thing. He was so ingrained. Charles Manson, it was said that he was hanging out there a lot at the Laurel Canyon. And if you know anybody that looks like they've been MK Ultra, I think the way he grew up, wasn't he the son of a prostitute and kind of handed around back and forth and never really had a home, never really anybody wanted him kind of thing. And that's part of what they blamed all his angst on with Manson.
Yeah.
He had a thing about being accepted and very angry if he didn't get his way. So you've got Glenn Campbell was part of. He was in and out. He didn't live there and he wasn't like part of that scene, but he was part of that scene because he belonged to something called the Wrecking Crew. The Wrecking Crew was a group of musicians, fantastic,
Greatest
badass,
band you've never heard of.
right, just
Help me out.
badass musicians here. And I mean, there's a woman on there that played the bass. She was the only woman in the whole thing of the Wrecking Crew. You can actually see the movie The Wrecking Crew on YouTube for free if you're interested. You want to hear some of it. It's great to hear some of those tunes you've heard all your life, who belong to what musician finally, because these people never got recognition. So
No.
she's the bass player that plays that Barney Miller bass line, and the one for Hill Street Blues and all that bass, that's her. And Glenn Campbell was a regular on the Wrecking Crew. So what used to happen were bands like the Monkees would have a song written for them, or somebody in the band wrote it, because I think, if I remember the Monkees documentary correct, Mike was getting in a lot of fights with managers and things like that, because they wanted choice. They had done that first album, they had done this the season, the first season, and they wanted to express themselves and do their own type of music and work on that. So there was a lot of that going back and forth. But Mike, like I said, he actually went on to be, write his own stuff and to stay in it. And like Steve said, a couple of the guys played around, but basically what they do is they'd go in and they'd put a little bit down, and then the Wrecking Crew would come in and do all the music to everybody's album. I mean, it was one after the other after the other. So when you go back, look at an old Ed Sullivan clip. Go look back at the Beatles. You're going to hate me for this, but I'm going to tell you the truth. Go look at the Beatles at Yankee Stadium.
Mhm.
Go look at American Bandstand when all these bands like Jefferson Airplane and Mamas and the Papas, they're up there eating bananas while the music's playing and chewing. They're doing all kind of stuff because it's all tape. It's all Milli Vanilli'd.
Yeah.
And half of these bands couldn't perform live, and people couldn't figure out what the heck it was, or they blamed it on drugs, or they said, oh, look at him, he's so deep into the music, he's on heroin. I can remember all of this. It just added to the whole mystique of the whole thing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean, Steve? When you started to hear about it, they were either on their way on a bad trip on heroin and drugs, or they were coming out of it, and everybody was hoping that they'd make it. And then the next thing you know is somebody was found dead here or dead there in a pool or a tub, or their own vomit, or God knows what else. But I
It's
just
like
don't think it was all
once you
accidental.
weren't of any use to anybody, or you had fulfilled your purpose
Mm-hmm.
and maybe knew too much, then you would have an accident or perish in a fire,
Yep.
or something would happen to you.
And all the
Um,
evidence with you. Thank you so
and
much, Donnie. Go
and as
ahead,
far as
sweetie.
the Monkees, if you want to see something really strange, right after their TV show finished, they came out with a motion picture called Head,
Yes.
Head. Look that up and watch that. If it's the most drug fueled, tripped out thing you'll ever see.
And you know who had a
Two
part in
ventures
writing
to
that?
Hollywood Frank Zappa is in it. Dennis Hopper's in it. Jack Nicholson.
Hmm.
Some of
Jack
these
Nicholson,
same
yeah.
characters we've talked about that are involved in all this,
Hmm.
they were in that too.
Absolutely. And Donnie says Laurel Canyon sounds like it had a lot of people who sold their souls, passed through, or lived there. Yeah, that's the thing. Or what I'm thinking, and what I'm going to probably do for next week, is I'm going to take some clips of Dave McGowan's, some of his interviews that he's done, because I think he said it best going through all this. Like Steve said, he did a wonderful blog about all this, and then starts digging, and he starts getting to what we call rabbit holes, and he just gets in there, and they found out, like, the thing that got him was that all these young people were connected to these military intelligence, either
Mhm.
one parent or both. I mean, some of them were MI5, in Britain and stuff like that. We think that whole Britain invasion had something to do with this too. But why? Why would you have
Well,
something like this to
look into
influence?
Tavistock,
Yeah,
Tavistock, and the Beatles. The Beatles were just as manufactured as the Monkees. People will get mad at you for saying that,
yeah,
but they were. They had the same clothes, they wore the same boots, they had the same haircuts. It was an experiment in early
yep,
experiment in mind and crowd control,
yep,
and that's kind of what the whatever went on in Southern California was a part of. It was the
yep.
American version of that. But look up the Tavistock Institute; it will blow your mind.
I have, let me see here. This is totally unrehearsed, I assure you. Let me see if I can find it.
And
Within
think
reach
of
here,
Rob
I
about
have
that
a,
stuff with the Beatles, like when they showed up to be on the Ed Sullivan Show, and you had these thousands of screaming girls waiting for them at the airport. They'd never been played on the radio here.
yep.
Nobody knew who they were, so somebody arranged to have all these people waiting there to greet them. These
Take it for a second, Steve. I'm going
supposed
to grab
fans.
something real quick.
Okay,
Hang on,
but
right, right quick.
it deeper and deeper and deeper, and we've only started to scratch the surface. There are so many other places and people and things that became involved in this. And again, military industrial complex had something to do with every single person involved, had either been in the military or were the children of active military, one or both parents. Um, Another thing, we're talking about Charles Manson there earlier. He went to kindergarten with a woman named Sarah Jane Moore. They grew up in the same neighborhood. Well, you remember in the early 70s, she tried to assassinate Gerald Ford. Not too long. I can't remember if who did it first, if it was
There you see it.
Squeaky Fromm or her, but they both tried to assassinate Ford. And Sarah Jane Moore had grown up and gone to school with Charles Manson as a child. Is that Bernard?
Can you see that pretty face right there smiling? That's his beautiful wife. And that is Mr. Bernard Pretty Purdy right there.
Who was the
I
drummer for
just
the Beatles?
I just
People will
opened
fight you
this
for
Christmas.
saying that.
I just opened this Christmas card. He is my buddy, and he is very good friends with. Sorry, guys, with my husband Mario. And the first time I met him, after getting a big old bear hug from him, I knew who he was, and we sat off to the side. And I said, "Listen, I feel really bad that you never got the credit, that you should have gotten." And that's what he's doing on this end of it. But he says, listen, he says, we sign contracts, and basically it's like signing an NDA. You don't disclose, because these young people were coming up, and they are the ones that went out on the stage. Now listen, I'm going to say it again. Yankee Stadium, when the Beatles played, you've got you've got multiple voices coming through. You got one microphone. You've got one microphone, and you've got those little bitty amps, and look where the guitars are hooked up and everything else. Now watch Ringo drum and listen to what you're listening to, and watch his hands. Watch him on anything that you watch him. The person that played the drum on the first 3 Beatle albums is my friend Bernard Pretty Purdy. So you can look up the Purdy Shuffle,
Yep.
and you can hear it. He's still teaching it to this day. But there's 1,000 stories like that. And when he came out and he wrote Let the Drums Speak, he actually got death threats, because people will not believe. They're so programmed to believe what they saw, which is why Steve said what he said last week about what's so big about Billy Vanilli. They all
Yeah.
do it.
Just I didn't understand why they centered them out and made such a shit show out of that when it's been going on the whole time you've had music.
Hmm. Hmm.
There was a
Hmm.
lot of times, even back to some of the old hillbilly performers and things, where they were literally too drunk to play and sing. Um, they'd send, say, Hank Senior out there with his guitar unplugged,
Hmm.
so they have the volume muted, and somebody else covering up for him. So
That's it. It's in a lot of cases, it's an illusion. So why would they go through? And yes, please hit the like. That helps us out a lot. I appreciate that, mods. Thank
willy-nilly
you.
piss somebody off. That's what that amounted to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's what happened there. But that was the big thing. So why so many military sons and daughters of military people, why would they go through all this to pull all this together? Well, think of what happened. It was a culture shock. Were they trying to use these young people to write music to stop a war? No,
No,
they were trying to do it to cause a distraction so they could have a war.
exactly. I think what it was, they were afraid of the whole anti-war movement, the whole counterculture,
Hmm.
and the power that it had over the kids.
Yep.
So in their minds, they thought, well, if we create our own counterculture
Hmm.
and we steer it the way we want to steer it, it's like
Hmm.
fighting fire with fire. We'll start a fire to stop the fire, and
Hmm.
and I believe that's what it was. And then that way, it was much easier to program other people. And LSD, that's all that was used
Yeah.
for by the government was in mind programming and mind control experiments,
Well, it's also
which they've admitted to.
like a test group. You've got this great big group out there. When you have admitted people that are in the CIA, Timothy Leary never ever, he bragged about that, and he used it and twisted it to melt these minds together. They had what was the name of the man? And I had the picture up, Steve, on that video. Was it Vito?
Vito and the Freakers.
Tell us about that, because that shows how to what lengths they'll go to try to. There's that picture.
There's Jim Morrison looking
Yep.
very collegiate there in his sweater,
There's his daddy.
standing on the deck, the bridge of the
Hmm.
Bon Homme
Yep.
warship there.
Hmm.
Jim and his daddy.
Using
Doesn't
the
I mean
Gulf
you
of
can tell
Tonkin.
it's Jim even in profile
Yeah,
there
I know. Is
with
that
the
funny?
short hair, but that was
So
I think
true.
that was at 13 or 14. So
Yeah,
you
he
can
was young.
imagine in 5 or 6 years he was the long haired Jesus Jim that everybody knew that his
Hmm.
parents were dead.
Yeah, his parents were dead, and he said,
His
"Well,
his dad's still alive, I think,
yeah."
and maybe his mom too.
You have people that would say, okay, well, the reason he said that is because he wanted to be away from them, the Eagles, man, all of that. Linda Ronstadt, they were the backup band for Linda Ronstadt,
Mhm.
and she was very cool when Glenn Fry came to her and said that they were going to split off and do their own thing. She was very supportive of it. But look at all these people here. Let me see if I can
Let's see.
find that guy. Vito, tell us a little bit. There
There's
he is. This
Vito and the
crazy guy.
Freakers,
There he
and
is.
he was a guy that lived in and around Hollywood. He lived up in the canyon too.
Hmm.
He had this group of people around him. He had been like he was old, a
That's
lot
him.
older than everybody in his circle at that time. He was born in like 1913,
Hmm.
and he had all these young girls with him, and he had a thing where he taught like sculpting classes and things like that to wealthy
He did.
women of Beverly Hills. He
Yep.
always had something like that going on. Well, he gathered around him this entourage of young, mainly women, and
Hmm.
they would get paid to show up at some of these clubs like the Troubadour or the Whiskey or wherever these shows were going on. And they would come in and start doing this wild dancing. And in the movie Mondo Hollywood, there's footage of them practicing.
Yep.
And there's one lady, I think it was his wife. She's dancing while holding a baby, and then the kid, it looks like it had shaken baby syndrome. It would have to,
Right.
but the sad, tragic thing about that, the baby's name was Godot, and it actually died. In one of the documentaries, it's listed as medical malpractice. But what really happened, they gave the baby LSD, and it walked off the roof of a building.
How about that?
So that really happened. Unlike
Oh.
Art Linkletter's daughter,
Hmm.
I think she just took the plunge. I don't think LSD had anything to do with it.
It did. Her autopsy came up clean.
In fact, what
Yeah.
I had read that it had been several weeks the last time she'd taken any drug.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they
Mm-hmm.
conjecture. But
One
Art,
after the other.
he was, America's parent. He was before he got into trouble, he was a Bill Cosby type. Before Cosby got into trouble, he was Art Linkletter's like America's dad. I remember watching
Mm-hmm.
his shows
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid. He had kids say the darndest things and stuff like that. He was a talk show host, just this kindly old man that said everybody wanted him to be their grandfather. And he saw that as something he could hop on and just a new horse to flog. And he literally, I think until the day he died, he was out talking about um, the evils of drugs and things. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not even sure that it's possible to overdose on LSD.
I, I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine what something
'Cause
like that looks like. I
have you
guess
ever
you just
heard of anybody
completely
doing?
melt.
Have you ever heard of
Yeah.
anybody doing what's called a thumbprint?
No.
Well, in the original people that brought it out, Owsley and some of those people that developed it, and they were giving it away to people. And
Yep.
again, where they get the money to do all this, to manufacture all this drugs, and then to distribute it to people. Well,
Yep.
one of the things that Owsley made people do before he would make them like one of his salesmen or one of his agents, you had to do a thumbprint. And what that was, it came in almost like a salt shaker, and so much went on per sugar cube or per blotter. But in
Mm-hmm.
order to be one of his salesmen, you had to take the same container, put your thumb over it, turn it upside down back, and then lick off whatever was on your thumb, which was literally the equivalent of thousands of doses of LSD.
Holy crap,
So if
man!
that wouldn't overdose you, I don't think there's any. I
Right.
mean, granted, you can kill yourself with water. You can drink enough water to do that.
Right. Or you can take enough LSD where you do something like she may have done, but again,
Yeah.
her body came up clean. But that one, I can't remember. It was the CIA agents that were giving it to each other, wasn't it? I know
Mhm.
FBI was involved too, but I
They gave
can't.
it to military agents too, out in the
Right. Right.
woods. They'd take them out in the
Well.
woods, dose them, drop them off. There was another guy. His family actually sued. That's how a lot of the MK
Mm-hmm.
Ultra stuff came to light. A CIA agent, they dosed him when he was out of town in a hotel room without his knowledge or
Mm-hmm.
consent, and I think he ended up going out a window or something. And his
Absolutely.
family stayed after it and were able to prove it enough. And that was when the CIA finally admitted to MK Ultra, but they claimed,
Mm-hmm.
oh well, but we stopped that, shortly thereafter, back in the 50s or
Yeah, and it was being done in the
but
late
it wasn't.
40s.
It still apparently goes on.
It was being
It's
done
just
in Harvard and Yale, and I mean
they
all
changed
these.
the name of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Leary, where did he come out of? He came out of like one of those universities, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, he sure did. And, and right out the gate started CIA. They said they have the best drugs. But, you wonder if they weren't all being used as, let's move it to the next. So the first grouping where they're slipping it to these agents without their knowledge and, videotaping them with prostitutes just to see how their character and stuff would change
Mhm.
without their knowledge. And of course, people are jumping out of windows and, going home and they don't realize they're on LSD. They don't know why their mind is doing what they're doing. So I can't imagine what was that like to go through. But Uncommon Belief said something here, and it's worth taking a look at. They could have been being taught MK Ultra tactics to use on the public through their music and influence. That's possible. But think too, they could have been using as a test group. The first group was a tighter group within agents. Now they've got test subjects of willing kids that are listening to this music, taking the LSD. They've got Vito and his dancers out there. They used to send him and his dancers out there. They'd pay them to go into these clubs and dance. And people who didn't like the music would come in just to see the spectacle
I
of these
said, yeah,
people
usually
dancing.
there was more attention being paid to what
Right.
Vito and the Freakers were doing rather than the band. So
Mm-hmm.
again, that made up for shitty bands that couldn't play or sing.
Mm-hmm.
All you remember was you went and you saw this wild freak out thing,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
there you go. And I think another thing that people don't really consider, if the young people had really risen up against the war and stuff, it would have been violent. It would have been bloody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was kind of headed that way. You look at things like Kent State,
Mm-hmm.
which had
And the Black Panthers, the Gray
four dead in
Panthers.
Ohio. You
Mm-hmm.
had what was it, the guard that opened fire on the students there.
Oh,
So it
yeah.
was going to turn into, I mean, like probably another civil war. But I think that the CIA and whoever that was in on it together found out that all the things that we've convinced these kids to do, make them docile, make them programmable.
Hmm.
They were taking acid, they were taking opiates, they were smoking pot. They're not going to fight. They're going to sit down
Yeah.
and listen to the music and dance their little groovy dance and
Hmm.
think that this is how we protest the war
Hmm.
instead of rising up and putting the politicians'
Make
heads on
love, not war.
pikes. Yeah.
They got people to move into communes. I mean, I've heard digging into this that even that whole fiasco with not the moons. What was the one with Guyana? Oh gosh, the Kool
Oh,
Aid.
yeah. Jim Jones,
Jim
Reverend
Jones,
Jim
and that whole
Jones,
thing was all
and the
set up
People's Temple. Yeah, and
and
what
moved
was
out CIA.
Congressman Leo Ryan doing down there anyway? He got
Hmm.
killed for going down there, but
Hmm.
whoops, I got coffee on my chin.
But that was all, I'm starting to hear that all that was part of it, and they just moved it out to another section. Like, okay, you take this test subject and go this way. Because
Hmm.
if you think about it, the first round, like I said, was going on, the late 50s, early 60s, right before all this. You got your Vietnam War starting in 61. You got Kennedy was trying to basically stop the war, stop the stuff with Cuba, stop all the nuclear antics that was going on back and forth, trying to squash and put water on all these little wildfires. But at the same time, you've got the CIA going in, trying to go back and forth. Look at Air America. Everybody's heard about how we were over there and bringing drugs back and forth. You've got involved here in the Wonderland killings, which Steve and I will get into next week on, the Helter Skelter and the
Hmm.
whole Tate LaBianca, the Folgers coffee heiress also that was killed there. You got Jay Sebring, you got all these people. And then you've got the LaBiancas the second day. All of this was going on. And then you got the Wonderland killings in the early 80s. That was a man that was involved in that. Was that Nate? That guy, I can't remember. I've got it all written down because we're going to do it next week. But
Um,
basically, to
it
briefly
was the
say,
guy that owned the one of the big clubs there in Hollywood that
yes,
everybody went to. I can't think of
yeah,
which one it was.
he was in the Air Force. He was dishonorably discharged. You know what he was caught doing?
And running
He
drugs,
running
probably.
drugs, and he
Hmm.
was hiding them. And I've said this 1,000 times, people don't believe me. He was hiding them in the body bags with the bodies of the dead soldiers coming back from
Hmm.
Vietnam, and they dishonorably discharged him. And he just moved into Laurel Canyon and started the big drug runs there, the cocaine and the heroin, which
Yeah.
is when Johnny Holmes got involved in it, because Johnny Holmes basically was learned more about him today than I ever wanted to know about Johnny Holmes. I can remember when the movie Deep Throat came out. Everybody was talking about it. I was in high school. I was probably freshman, sophomore, maybe somewhere around in there. And that's when you start hearing this name, Johnny the Wad Holmes. I had no idea anything about it other than he was a porn star, right? So now I'm looking at this end of it, and he was all up and involved in all this. But well, what happened was he basically not a great looking guy. He happened to have one really good feature. Let's just put it that way. And so he went to go get his pictures taken. He had found one photographer that just thought, wow, he's come across something here, and got the guy involved in porn. Well, a year into porn, after his marriage starts breaking up because for some reason his wife didn't understand why he wanted to be a porn star, he couldn't understand why she couldn't understand. So there you go. And they got divorced. So what friends say is after a while living the high life, he kind of got bored. So he started doing drugs. He didn't drink, didn't smoke dope, weed, and he didn't do any other drugs. Well, the first thing he does is he starts drinking. Then he starts smoking a dope a couple weeks later. The next thing you know, he's a full blown heroin addict, 3 months into it. And that was it. And the next thing you know, he's doing all these really sleazy deals. And to say that about Johnny Holmes after the sleazy things he did in some of these porn
Then he
things
got even sleazier,
in
but it
real
was the
life,
love for the drugs. The cocaine got
sleazy.
a hold of.
Yeah.
I had read accounts of people that were parties he had said that they had never seen one human that could smoke so much or snort so much coke and live. And he
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't just snort it; he would inject it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Eddie Nash, Glenn Danson got it right there.
Thank you.
Eddie
Eddie
Nash is a
Nash.
club owner. That wasn't even his real name. He had an
Yeah,
Arabic sounding name.
yeah.
And I
So
can't remember
Nash,
the name of the club that he owned, but it's one of the bigger clubs there in Hollywood.
right, and he's running all this. Now he's got one of these houses too, where everybody's in and out. Now, what happened was everybody thought, we had the Nash. What they basically did was they go and they buy, they excuse me, they break into this guy's house because again he's got drugs and he's got money, he's got jewelry. Okay, Holmes was part of that. They want payback. This guy wants payback. So he says, I know who did it. I'm going to go break into their house. So back and forth, back and forth. Johnny Holmes was so messed up, he had to go back 3 times to make sure he left the back door open so these people could come in and get revenge for the robbery. Well, what happens is there's 5 people there. And as you saw in this little thing here, let me see if I get back to the end here. The secrets right about here was okay. There he is. All of these people were acquitted, by the way, and
And that
these
house it still
people,
stands, and the people that live
mhm,
there, I don't know if they know what happened there or not, but they will come out
right?
and yell at you if you take pictures because
Yep,
it happened to me. I was
yep,
shooting video with my camera, and the
yep.
lady came out on the deck and started cursing at me.
Yep. Well, that was the 4 right there that died. Now, these people weren't just killed, they were absolutely beaten to death to the point where they can see the striations from the pipes that they used, metal pipes to beat these people,
And they
were
think
imprinted in their forehead.
that Holmes also they made him dirty his hands. They gave him a pipe, and he actually had to beat
Hmm.
somebody too,
And a
or
bloody
he was going
handprint.
to happen to him.
His bloody handprint was found above the headboard in the bedroom, Johnny's handprint, and still all 3 of them got away. There was rumored that Johnny paid one of the jurors $50,000 to make it a hung jury, and that's how he got out of the mess. But yeah, he had to go back 3 times, admitted that he was so messed up. He got immunity to rat on the other people, but still they got acquitted too. Back then, it was nothing for people to pay off juries, judges. Sounds like it's still going on, huh?
Mhm.
But that whole thing was all orchestrated. Like I said, the one guy who was discharged from the Air Force, keep in mind, he was just dishonorably discharged. He didn't do it time. He did get arrested for this. He just got moved to Laurel Canyon, where he set up another drug ring, where the military or whoever was supplying all this, the CIA or whoever, back and forth. It was one great big thing. So you've got Morrison's dad involved in the Gulf of Tonkin that never happened, that got us involved, full blown, very much like Pearl Harbor did to World War II, and all this other stuff. It just gets you. Think about how 9/11. Think about how you felt the day after 9/11. How many people do you think went down and volunteered at recruiters' offices?
Yeah.
The line was around the block. When you have a big emotional impact like that, everybody, that's it. Let's go kick some butt. And that's just the American spirit of going in. I want to do my part. They've attacked my country. And you have all these young people going over to Vietnam, over 50,000 dead, countless number of North Korean, South Korean, Cambodians, Laotians.
Mhm.
We weren't even supposed to be there. But that was just one nasty, rotten war that just kept,
Yeah.
tearing through the fabric, even here. And I think that whole section was part of it, Steve. I really do. There was way too much stuff going in Laurel Canyon. And
Yeah.
I think somebody now, uh, doesn't want people talking about it too, because I don't know if you know this, Steve, but I never had heard of Dave McGowan till you pulled up the book and sent me the book. So I started studying on him, and listening to some of his interviews. He did one in his hometown. It wasn't very far. It was on the same street as the Troubadour. He was a native Californian,
Mhm.
lived in Los Angeles, I believe, and he's doing this interview, and I'm looking at the date, and people are asking him in the audience, did any of the people that are still living ever call you or email you, or the families of people, want you to stop talking about this? And he said that he doesn't pay a lot of attention to emails, but he did hear that the surviving children of Frank Zappa were a little upset that they were putting, that he was putting the part about their dad in there. Um, but that was it. Now, fast forward a couple of weeks, and I can piece together these interviews. There's another interview after his death. Well, what happened to Dave McGowan? Um, Basically, he was fine. You saw his picture, and I'm going to show
Mhm.
you his picture again here
Yeah, I was
because I
going to
really want you
say
to look at.
earlier, there's a theory about the theorist
Hmm.
that came up. Um,
There he is.
if you listen to a lot of those interviews with him for the past several years he was alive, he had a persistent cough.
Cough. Yep.
But as far as I know, he wasn't a smoker or anything
Hmm.
like that. But he died of lung cancer,
Hmm.
and there's thought there that somehow they gave him cancer to shut him up
Yep. I
because
don't
once it
know.
took hold, it took him out quick.
Yes, it did.
Somebody was asking about the hey, Lady Nopingham, good to see you here. Everybody
Hello.
go sub to Lady Nopingham. We're trying to get her to 250 by Christmas.
Go get it. Go
Um,
sub over to her channel. Hey, lady, how you
People were
doing?
asking more about Eddie Nash. His real name was Adel Gharib Nasrallah, born in British Palestine.
Hmm.
Um, his family owned 48 hotels, but he got in some trouble. Had to immigrate to the United States. Had only $7. Briefly found work as an actor and a stuntman. He was good with horses. In the 60s, he opened a hot dog stand on Hollywood Boulevard called Beef's Chuck. And then by the 1970s, he owned several nightclubs and restaurants in Los Angeles, such as PJ's Club, which later became known as the Starwood. That was the big one.
Starwood.
The Sold Out Club in Hollywood, the Odyssey Disco, the Paradise Ballroom, the Seven Seas, Alibaba's, and the Kit Kat Strip Club that somebody had mentioned there in the chat.
Wow.
So yeah, he was a big businessman. He was very diverse, but a lot of that money wasn't just from restaurants
Amen.
and hot dog stands. It was from running drugs. And
Yeah.
there's talking that even reaches as far as the British royal family
Hmm.
that they were the
I'd
British
heard that.
forces were complicit in helping smuggle opium out of the Golden Triangle area
Hmm.
of Thailand. It
It's
was
crazy. I mean, there's a lot of interwoven things here, but just like
a lot
Steve
of rabbit
said,
holes.
yeah. Well, like Steve said, if you notice how he said he had a persistent cough. Well, you saw the picture I showed. He actually had a construction company. He was always out, very healthy. He worked all the time on this story, and like Steve said, it was all on a blog, which he took down and then put together in this book and refined it. But he also wrote a book on the moon landing.
That was how I originally discovered him.
Yes, and how he showed through his book that he doesn't believe that whole thing happened, and he delved in some other things, but with this one, I listened to an interview his brother gave, and his brother said, "Well, I'll tell you something about the emails. It wasn't an email; it was a phone call." And he said about he went away and he came back, and he got a little scared because he went away for about 3 weeks, and this is Dave talking, and he kind of went out of pocket. He didn't want to take phones and everything. He just wanted to get away from everything and just relax, and he wasn't watching the news and things like that. When he got home, he turns on the TV, and the first local news he hears, there's a man with his name spelled differently. Instead of MAN, it was MEN. He was an author. Same number of kids lived in the same town, that had committed suicide after mass murdering his entire family, including the dog,
Hmm.
against suspicious circumstances. He said, that's the one that when I heard it, I sat on the bed, and he said, I can remember my hand going numb and the remote control falling out and hitting the floor, because he was just so shocked. Like, oh my God, somebody who's
They
an
got the
author,
wrong one.
they
Yeah.
got the wrong one. If I had been here, would I have shot my whole family and committed suicide? It scared him. Right after that, he gets a phone call because he did a big interview. I don't know whether it was with the Antidote or the another one that he did. He got a phone call that said, "Watch out for cancer," and hung up.
Mhm.
2 weeks later, he was diagnosed with massive, fast acting cancer. It was like by the time he found out about it, it was already third stage. He was dead within 3 months. And I can see the interviews where he's talking and he's just getting this book out and he's coughing through the thing. And I'm wondering, was that the last interview he did? Was that the last? He said it was so fast and they had nothing wrong with him before this. So I don't know, Steve. We've heard that from many people. Oswald being, no, Jack Ruby being one of them that shot Oswald.
Mhm.
He said they gave me cancer. They came in here and shot me and gave me cancer. And Jack Ruby was dead not long after that with very fast acting, fast moving cancer. The same, I think, could very possibly be
Mhm.
what took out Dave McGowan. So
Yep.
I don't know. It's a mystery, Steve.
Yeah, and just it's just there's so many rabbit holes, and other than all the deaths and murder and carnage and mutilation, it's fun when you
Hmm.
start reading this stuff and you start
Hmm.
seeing how this could be connected and that could be possible and this may have happened that way. It's really
Absolutely.
fascinating. And as
Absolutely it
far
is.
as the moon stuff, he didn't say that it never happened, but just the way that it was presented to us was not the way that it really played out.
Was, yeah. And the name of the book is Weird Scenes. I think I can't find it again. But anyway, it's Weird Scenes by David McGowan, and it's quite. It's an amazing the depths he's gotten in this. I mean, he can go back and trace the bloodline of David Crosby, all these people.
It's hard to
One of
put
the
down,
interesting,
and he hated
right?
David Crosby. He would
Yeah,
he would any chance he got to make fun of Crosby's playing and singing ability.
yeah.
Just when he was talking about the blood lineage and stuff, he said, "Well, certainly wasn't due to his singing and guitar playing abilities that anybody wanted Did you
Well,
finish the whole book, Cisco?"
I didn't finish the whole book. I got to the death list and I was trying to find out how to get everything down. I mean, you've got everything in there from the Black Dahlia. I mean, all of these murders, right?
Mhm.
All the different ones. You think, okay, well, it's just Hollywood and those crazy stars. But now you're getting into, girlfriends, that were up
Mhm.
there and just hanging out for a little bit, found hacked to death in a ditch just outside of a house. And, nothing happens. Nothing happens. House burns down. People are, dead inside. Nothing happens and moves on to the next one. You wonder how you can have things like the Helter Skelter, house and that death house. And then you look back and find out that Henry Fonda lived in this house.
Mhm. Inger Stevens, the farmer's
Yes.
daughter that she talked about there, she owned it at one time.
Hmm.
There was a wishing well outside that she had installed, and it was just a gorgeous estate at
Well,
that time. But yeah,
it's
that's the
crazy.
thing. A lot of this, all this that's gone on, nobody has ever been prosecuted or made to pay for it, really, in any way. All the
Mm-mm.
mysterious murders, I've talked about Sal Mineo and Roman
Hmm.
Navarro and
Hmm.
all these other people and then a lot of people that maybe did or didn't commit suicide or did or didn't overdose.
Hmm.
Mama Cass, she supposedly
Hmm.
overdosed and choked to death on a ham sandwich.
Hmm.
But again, hers was one of the party houses. She knew who was into what. And if you delve into the mamas and the papas, John Phillips was just, I'm going to say it here, he was an absolute piece of shit. He
Yeah.
molested his own daughter, Mackenzie
Yeah.
Phillips.
Yeah. And that's what messed her up. And she was caught up in drugs. Frozen Moment says, didn't he ask David Crosby if the industry still has altars and sacrifices? And Crosby said, of course.
Yeah, that was
Hmm.
supposedly John Todd Collins.
Hmm.
Uh, Produced a series of tapes that they played in a lot of fundamentalist churches back in the 70s on Wednesday nights when they had Bible study.
Hmm.
But yeah, supposedly John Todd was into all that and knew how it worked and things. And he had asked Crosby if they still do that, still have the altars and the sacrifices and the oaken doors and things. And
Hmm.
that's how Crosby responded was, of course they do. That's the way it works. That, uh, when they cut an album on that master, they like do a spell over it. They send a demon or
Hmm.
some kind of spirit with that, and then every time you play that record, it does that spell or whatever, it releases
It's
something out,
it
and that's
sounds
what makes
crazy, but
you
it's true.
that's what makes you want to hear a song over and over and over and over again, and you don't know why.
You don't know why, but it's absolutely true. And
Maybe.
they have people that stand around and put this into it, and not in every single one, but certain ones that are picked. And you think about it today. I mean, look at that concert that just happened.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, if you don't think that you were looking at a portal to hell and CERN right there, and you've got things, I can see shadow things jumping into the crowd and all kind of other stuff. But then you have people that deny it, deny it, deny it, and they say all
Yeah,
these kids with a certain frequency played this certain thump, 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 and all of a sudden you got kids just dropping.
going
Now,
into
what
cardiac
is that?
arrest. Now, I've been to
What
some
is that?
loud concerts.
Yeah.
I've had where the bass
Hmm.
would make my chest
Thump you.
hurt,
Yeah.
but
I can
but
tell you,
yeah,
I can attest to you right now. I lived through six concerts all in the same summer. So within 8 week period, I saw Judas Priest with Iron Maiden 6 times. Each one of them was front row, either center, left, or right. So I'm sitting right in front of Judas Priest and the Iron Maiden sound system and still live to tell about it. Not to mention 3 AC/DC concerts. And my heart didn't stop once. There's something going on.
yeah. And then there were 8 people that died. There were 8 pillars of fire on the stage. In an interview prior to all this, he'd said that he
Hmm.
wanted blood, and the interviewer said, "But yeah, but you're not bleeding." And he said, "No, but the audience is." He said, "I want them to give their bodies." Well, giving your body, what's that other than a sacrifice?
Right.
So he was already saying he wanted blood, he wanted
Hmm.
violence, and he wanted whatever was going to happen. And
Hmm.
I don't get it. I mean, I've been to some punk shows where that was just the order of the day. There was a mosh pit, a big active one, and saw about one person per song carried out.
Hmm.
But for that kind of music, I don't understand the wilding or whatever they called it, where they get out there and go nuts to.
Hmm.
Doesn't
Froze here
work.
is saying the shadows walking across the top of the mountain was creepy. Yeah, it certainly was. I can tell you, as again, I shudder. I hesitate to say I have any kind of abilities whatsoever. I just say intuition, sensitive, whatever, because people put labels on you. Goes, oh, does that mean you can move frying pans with your mind? No, probably not. You know what I'm saying? But I just say it like that. But I do see things, and I can tell you, I saw black shadows jumping into that crowd at that concert. From different people's videos that they were holding their cameras. So they're different videos from different perspectives, and I could see them diving in. And I know other people that are sensitive that can
The
see it too.
the veil is getting thin.
Yes, it
I've
is.
had other people tell me that, whereas before it was only certain time of the year, it's getting thin and
Mm-hmm.
getting thinner all the time now. I've
Mm-hmm.
had so many people tell me that whatever's there, it's getting thinner. And that's why you're seeing this uptick in sightings of skinwalkers and not deer and
Mm-hmm.
shadow people
And
and
humanoids,
the
the flying
demons, all this
humanoids.
other
I've
stuff.
getting a lot of reports on that. The kind that can jump up and land on things, like we're talking about the prophecy, how Christopher Walken's character, that
Mhm.
they can land on things like a bird and just sit there, which is so creepy.
That is such a creepy movie.
I know, but yeah, it is. But they're seeing so many, and Steve and I went back by, oh gosh, 7, 8 years ago, I think, at this time, where we're talking about the uptick there. They were seeing them in Chicago, and
Mhm.
now they're starting to see them around these concerts and things like that. I mean, you look up and see a thing the size of a human being sitting on top of a light
Yeah,
post.
winged humanoids. They're all over the place in Chicago and that area, and in other parts of
Hmm.
like
CERN.
Ohio, West Virginia.
Are
CERN.
you kidding
Are you
me?
kidding me?
100%.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that has something to do with it.
Hmm.
And if you look at some of that footage where they've got a statue of Shiva the Destroyer out there, so that should tell you something.
Hmm.
And then there's one thing where they're out there in robes doing some kind of ritual around it, and then they said, "Oh, we just did that as a joke."
I know
Okay,
everything is supposedly a
everything is
joke.
a joke.
So, you've got these beautiful, what look like to us beautiful people at Laurel Canyon. You got, little Joni Mitchell with her little folk voice and her long, beautiful straight hair. Everybody
Ladies
had
of
to
the
have that
Canyon.
straight
That
hair.
was the first album that ever really
Yeah.
documented what was
You've
going
got
on there.
God, Carole King, you've got all of these wonderful songs and all this stuff coming out. And you think with all this beautiful music, like, gosh, I mean, there's Neil Young songs now that I absolutely adore. I mean, Heart of Gold, but Old Man's got to be my favorite. Cinnamon Girl,
Cinnamon Girl,
Harvest, gosh, what a great
uh,
album.
Powder
Jackson
Finger.
Brown, Running on Empty. I wore that album out in high school. You've got all of these different things, but if you look at it, everything was like tapestry. You got Carole King and, uh, you know, uh, all of these beautiful kind of music coming
Well,
out. And I
even
gotta
in the
say, Crosby,
drugs and
Stills, Nash
sex.
and Young, I
Uh,
love some of their stuff. Find the Cost of Freedom, Wooden
yeah,
Ships, all these different things, that they did. The sound was great. So you wouldn't think that there was some kind of dastardly um uh narrative being pushed here.
mhm.
You know what, these kids might not even have known it, but you can't tell me Stephen Stills. I saw him live. I always thought that he was such a jerk, and I don't know, I mean, I could be completely wrong on this, but just my take. He was my least favorite of the group. I always liked Graham Nash and Neil Young. I just thought he was a hoot when he came up. Rust Never Sleeps, I thought he went round the bend, right round the bend. But he had all those little Ewoks and stuff on there, but I was just as stoned in the 70s as he was, so it
Yeah.
was cool.
Well, that was
But
the thing with all the
yeah.
sex and drugs and everything. There was still a pureness and innocence to it, almost that
Mm-hmm.
it was love and peace and flowers, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't really drugs and sex. It was love and peace and flowers. Yeah, but it was all
But you
about
think
the sex and drugs.
all of this drugs, all this death, all of these people being taken out, and everything else, is something bigger had to be going on. Somebody bigger had the
There's
puppet
a
strings
much
here.
bigger agenda somewhere.
You've got
Absolutely.
Steven Stills coming out, and in the famous Woodstock thing where he comes out in the fur coat, and everybody's yelling at him, and they start that little fight. If you guys remember, it was the Hells Angels, it was the Rolling Stones, it was all that stuff, and Steven Stills is yelling on stage at these people who are yelling at him for wearing fur, and you're like, you're supposed to be this and against war and against death and all this blah blah blah, and Steven Stills wasn't having it. Well, let me tell you, Steven Stills used to get go in and tell people that I fought in Vietnam. I was in Vietnam, and everybody in all these like little like Rolling Stone interviews and things like that, it says okay, well, he must have been a drug ridden stupor, and just imagine the whole thing. Hold on now. Dave McGowan has traced him back, that it's very possible Stephen Stills could have been in when we were advising, like in 61, 62. So think about
No.
that. It's possible. Maybe he was over there. He wrote a little song called what's the name? Night Flyer.
Hmm.
Was it Night Flyer or Low Flyer or something like
Something
that?
like that.
Basically, it was a song written about like the movie Air America that came out, where a lot of people working for the CIA over in Vietnam. They're going from Cambodia to Laos, picking up all these drugs, bringing them in. It's CIA planes, all on tax dollars. All on your tax dollars are paying for this. So if you hear all these things, or people were over there making drug deals for this or that, at this point, guys, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. At what point are we going to stop looking at all these things and going, it's a coincidence? Because there's something going on in the canyon, and Dave put on on the cover of his book, he said there's lots of places you can go to get maps and things like that, all the stars homes, and of course you've got those tours that'll take you to all the different homes where people died. Well, that's a long tour, I can tell you that right now, because every time you turn around, it's not one or two people might have died in this house in one incident. Then you go back, and 5 years later somebody else died there, and 10 years later somebody else died and was found cut up in the lawn. I mean, it's everywhere. You can't throw a joint and not hit a murder site in this place. Think about that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ludicrous if you think about what they've pulled over. Now, were they just testing people out in the public? Was this their way to get this drug that they were testing on a larger test base, by getting it out there in the college campuses and stuff like that? you know I don't know. Do you think that the government would be involved in putting drugs into the inner city to check and see what would happen, or maybe take the legs out from under the functioning poor, or to see if
Again,
crime would rise?
it's to keep
Gee,
things the way they are. I mean,
yeah.
there is no war on drugs. There's a war on the people.
Exactly right, man. And then they blame, the kids, and now we've got people that are fighting, for their lives. There's not one family that you can mention that's not been, affected by somebody overdosing or somebody involved or having their lives ruined by this. But it's all ingrained in the movie industry, the music industry. All of it's, I believe, planned
There,
in some way
there
or
are
another.
military liaisons that
Mhm.
check every single movie, television show that goes
Yes,
out, and well, can you make it this way? Can you change that? Can we do this? We want people to view this way or that way. That's why I think things like the Predator films and things like that, where you see it in a movie and then people see it in real
yes.
life,
Hmm.
it's stuff that's there. It exists in the military. And
Camelio,
I've heard that anything you see in the movies like that, that the military has had it for years, and
absolutely.
that's just a way of easing it into people's minds
Hmm.
and their consciousness from their subconsciousness. That the more you see it, the more you're used to it, and the more you believe in it, and that's how they start agendas and move agendas and push things in the direction they want to go.
100%, Steve. Look at Robert Guthrie's Camelio.
Hmm.
We've said it 100 times on this show, talking about that, and the way Robert Guthrie. One of the main people, I can't remember his name now, but I think it was a pseudonym anyway, where he came through and he said, "Well, why did it take you so long to come?" Forward. Well, I'm a heroin addict and I'm
Hmm.
homeless and nobody's going to listen to me. And, it's happened to several other people I'm acquainted with. They're picking on us and targeting us because nobody's going to believe us when we
Yeah,
say
exactly.
that these people are in our house and this is what's happening and this is what they're doing. And at that point in time, I believe that they talked about the MK Ultra. They talked about forcing drugs,
Hmm.
giving drugs without people's knowledge and then studying them. That was all in that book. The invisibility, the cloak of invisibility, whether it be people or something as big as a tank. And
Yeah,
how long ago was
and
that,
that's
Steve?
just, I mean, that's
20 years?
yeah, and that's just a study in the way people that are marginalized are taken advantage of. I mean, the same with
Yes.
serial killers or armed robbers and things like that. They'll
Hmm.
go out and roll the drunks and rob
Yes.
prostitutes and murder them because that's people that aren't going to be missed. Um,
Exactly. Still to
Same
this
with,
day.
and that's if you were going to test something on somebody, what better groups of people to test them on than the homeless, than the drug addicted? Because, like that guy said, nobody's going to listen to me anyway. Do whatever you want to do, and
Exactly.
observe how it affects me.
And these are human beings. These are human beings, and I just, I don't understand it. All these young people. I mean, when you again, I'm thinking back at what I can remember. What was going on in my life at the time, and one of the number one things that brings you back in memories is a song. And I absolutely love a lot of this music, and it'll bring you right back to that time. I mean, when I hear "Let It Be." I'm like 8, 9 years old, walking barefoot on a hot sidewalk in West Belmore, Jersey Shore, going to my aunt's house, happy, not a care in the world. And it takes me right back to that time, with my transistor radio that had one little earbud in it. And I was so proud to have it, and to influence the music like this in our time. This is the soundtrack of our lives. And now each and every single one of these people, you have to double question, what was the motive behind the music? And what's the motive behind the music now? Because here we are. This is from, you're talking early 60s to now. And we've gone from subtle innuendo and some dirty handed dealings and porn stars and druggies, and again, nobody cares when it happens to them, right? Because that's that public persona.
Mhm.
But think about what they've done to you as far as with your music. I'll never be able to listen to California Dreaming again without thinking about this. I'll still like the song, but I'm going to think about this. You can't unlearn it once you've learned it. Donnie's got a question here. In your opinion, how common are violent crimes and murders caused by unresolved demonic possessions or influence? In my opinion, I don't know. I think that's for both of us, Steve. In your opinion, how common are violent crimes and murders caused by unresolved demonic possessions or influence? I think it's pretty high, Donnie. And I'll tell you why I think that, and then I'll let Steve answer. I think it's high because I think it's part you and part them, because they wouldn't be able to be there. You know what I'm saying? Unless there was some kind of a break. And that could be an innocent one that you don't have a choice over. Like we've talked about people, children who are abused. And that opens you up, believe it or not, unfair as it may be, to that kind of influence and that demons, because they're thriving for that's like a buffet that just got opened for them,
Yeah.
so I do believe that, because there's a lot more drugs, there's a lot more people experimenting, and a lot more angst in the world, and people break, and they don't mean to, they don't break all the way, but they get little cracks in their persona and their aura. And I think it's easier now. Plus what Steve said, the veil is thinning. There's more of them. There's more people summoning. There's more spells being cast across globally. Live satanic things on the, halftime shows and Grammys and things. In my opinion, I've seen it. And I don't think it's as underground anymore. I think it's in your face. I think we just lost Steve, but I think it's kind of, in your face even more. But guys, digging back, there he is. We got you back.
Yeah,
We
I
got
don't know what happened. It just winked out, and then it said, "You're entering a broadcast studio."
buttons again. I just think that that's just my opinion. Of course, there's no way to know, but I remember in Alabama. It had to be in the late 90s. I wish I could remember the family name. I feel bad not giving them their due respect. But just to answer your question, Donnie, I remember this kid very much like you hear in the headlines now. We don't, he was such a quiet guy, stayed by himself, that kind of thing. One night just up and killed his entire family with a hatchet. And when they arrested him and he did his perp walk where they just pulled him out of the house because he was still there, and just you can imagine how he must have looked, with that rage. But when they turned him and he was in cuffs and they put him against the car and he looked at the camera, his whole face, I could see it. I could
Hmm.
still see it on him. His face was changing. And I remember looking at, my family was watching TV with me, and I said, that's that one. He was possessed when he did
Yeah,
this. He's not going to remember a thing. And he doesn't.
and he didn't. Yeah, and that's you see that in other cases. I remember like when they finally took down Jeffrey Dahmer. They
Hmm.
said when they had him in cuffs, had him on the floor. They said his countenance changed. He was screaming, letting out these unearthly
Hmm.
screams and things, and said it didn't
Uh,
even look like him. But that leads me back and then to the question there. Um, I think Ephesians 6:12, King James Version says it best, for we wrestle not against
mhm.
flesh and blood, but against principalities,
Principalities,
against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this
darkness.
world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That tells you what you need to know right there. It's
Hmm.
not one another we're fighting. It's something bigger than all of us, something,
Hmm.
an evil that's out there that's as old as time itself.
Hmm.
And that's what we're up against. And it can use people. It can use other people against you. It can use you
Yep.
to
And
affect
drop you.
other people.
And drop you like an empty shell, like
And
put you
that's
on like a glove, and then leave you laying there like you just like one of those gloves
like
in the
these
parking lot that have
these
been run over by cars. That's what
people
you feel
that
like.
that black out and then wake up
Hmm.
to learn that they've murdered a dozen people
Hmm.
or killed their family or something.
Hmm.
I've
Now, that's not to say all of them, but again, you said,
true.
influenced as well, Donnie.
Yeah, I
So,
think it's way up
influence,
there.
how much is it just where it's just the whispering? Did you hear what he said? What did he mean by that? What did he mean by that? He said that.
You gonna
Did
let him get away with that?
yeah, is he? You going to keep letting him? Everybody heard him say that and made you feel that way in front of everybody. You're going to have to do, and then it's just planting those evil seeds, as like my nana used to call it. And it's just What is that? Okay, now let's break that down. Is it? Really like your conscience is just your mind and you're wrestling back and forth, Possibly. Is it an earthbound spirit, that just a regular human being that's just pissed and learns that it can mess with you and has influenced you and you're whispering and telling you stuff? Absolutely. Now, is it something, an entity that's ancient, never been human before, and just really wants to eat your soul? That's possible too.
Could be. And Be Kind wanted to hear me read that Bible verse against
That's
Ephesians
beautiful.
6:12,
Yes,
King
please
James
do.
Version. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places.
Yep.
Now,
That's
a
it.
lot of people that I know, their testimony would probably be just the first four words there, for we wrestle not. But the
Mhm.
people that are out there fighting the good fight, they realize that it's not just other people that we're dealing with here, that
Mhm.
there's an evil, there's an inherent evilness. I
It
mean,
absolutely is.
if you read the Bible and believe in the Bible things, it tells you that Satan is the Lord of this world.
Hmm.
And that's what everything runs under. There's an evil here that was already here,
Hmm.
and that preys on people. I mean, it's not only demonic possession, but there's demonic oppression, which is like what you were talking about, the whispers.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
you can let them get away with that. The thing. 'Cause I've
Absolutely.
heard people say that I hear a voice, but I don't know if it's God or Satan talking to me. That always just blew my mind. How could you not know? I mean,
I know.
surely I have the discernment. Thankfully, there's ways, and I'm not going to preach here, hopefully, but there's ways to tell if it doesn't
Your moral
exhort.
compass.
Yeah, if it doesn't exhort, edify, or comfort, then it's not God. God's not
Hmm.
going to tell you to go skin somebody alive. I'm sorry,
That's true.
that ain't going to happen.
Well, I agree with everything you just said, Steve. And the thing is I want you to harken back, guys. A couple people. I think Donnie is currently reading our book right now. I know last week he said that he had questions about like snot hag and stuff like that. And what happened to the pies? I don't know, Donnie. They just gone. We
I
never
got it.
found we never had found a pie pan. We never found nothing, not a crust, not a pecan on the floor. Gone,
A
gone,
pecan.
gone, gone. Yeah, they were just incredible. And I still can't believe that my mom had them look out in the cornfield for the pie pans. I'm thinking, how'd the pies get in the cornfield? Why are
Well,
we
I
looking
mean
at the
that
cornfield?
that could happen. I mean, I could
Well,
conceivably. Back then, you had hobos. You had guys that rode the
yeah,
rails, and somebody like that, if they saw a pie cooled off in a window, it was
yeah.
going to disappear. But
Well,
I don't think it was anything like that.
no, it wasn't. I mean, there were six pies on that. We had a picnic table in the kitchen, and there was, I think, at least six, maybe seven pies in there.
They
And
all
and
got gone from there.
both screen doors were locked from the
Plus,
inside.
they were hot. You can't
Yeah.
carry a hot pie. You pick up a hot pie in a pie pan, you're going to blister your hand.
So that's one of the craziest things of app porting I've ever heard. The only things on app porting that more than massive things like that just disappearing and never showing up again was probably the ones where raw eggs have come through the ceiling. Not in my house. This was just another story from somebody I know. Eggs coming through the ceiling, or the ceiling starts raining, or these eggs without breaking the eggshell coming through the ceiling, landing on the floor, and then breaking. So that's just incredible to me. So I don't know about the app porting as far as all of that stuff, but I know things can happen. So where the pies went, I don't know. I thought it was more incredible how my mom handled it, and she was just trying to give everybody something to do till she could process the
Make
whole
more
thing.
pies.
Yeah, go out in the cornfield and look for the pies there. And my sisters just right out there, okay. And they kind of look, and I'm just sitting there, and my mom is holding her head going, what do we do? What do we do? And Thanksgiving dinner, I mean, gosh, what are you going to do? People are expecting pie and stuff. So they threw together some other desserts, but that was crazy. But Donnie had another quick
Yeah,
question. You go ahead, Steve.
I like that comment that Donnie just put up there.
Let
I
me
love
see.
that.
I didn't get to see it yet. Let
Yeah.
me see
I
here.
started reading your book while sitting on the toilet. I wound up having to crawl out of the bathroom because my legs
They
fell
fell
asleep.
asleep. Oh, that's the best review
I've done
ever.
that so many times. What that is, that's an excellent
That's
way
an
to
excellent
describe that
review.
book. If
Please
you read
send that
this
to
on the
Amazon.
toilet, you'll have to crawl out. because your legs will be
Please
asleep.
send that review to Amazon right underneath the book. Please do it. Oh, that would be wonderful. I got to tell you, everybody is so kind. I don't know where Jackie is tonight. Sending love to her. I hope everything is fine. Usually, she very, very rarely misses a show, so she must be very busy. So, sending lots of love out to you, sweetie. But all the wonderful reviews. Jackie did a lovely one. The ones that get me too are people. When I first started seeing strangers, I didn't know at all that had read the book and put it in there. And I'm like, my God, they love it. This is amazing to me. I mean, I've cried literally, because when you put words down in a book and trying to tell a story and it touches somebody, that's all you need. Somebody enjoyed it. Somebody got something from it. So that's really funny, Donnie. I think that's great. You should put that in there. But the best thing is that you're reading it and you're enjoying it. And
Yeah, there's everything in there. You'll be scared, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll throw up. You
I
might
don't think
even soil yourself.
I don't think he's gotten to Gettysburg yet. When you get to Gettysburg, that'll plant you, because that is like the number
That's
one. That's what I
worth
do.
the cost to the book alone. That chapter
Yeah.
on Gettysburg.
And it's kind of cool too, because when I started out, it was one thing, and then I wind up taking it. Here I had this wonderful, scared, angry, lost, probably forgotten, Revolutionary War soldier, and then at the end, I'm helping Gettysburg war soldiers on the 150th anniversary of the battle to cross over. So it's kind of like, it's full circle in that book. So thank you so much for reading it. Everybody has read it, put in a review. I think that's fantastic. But I wanted to say something before we finish tonight, and I was saying that about the music because I'm so musically influenced. It's been a huge part of my life. I mean, songs can remind me of my mom or take me back to a moment, riding in the car with her singing, or, major things happen and this music takes you back to poignant times in our life. And even after you start learning all this stuff, don't let it ruin that music for
Yeah.
you. Keep singing along with, the Eagles or whatever it is, because they've taken so much beauty out of this, and it's been such a part of our lives. Beat them at their own game and enjoy it anyway, in spite of
Yeah.
all this that was
I know.
going on.
And you remember when we were writing the book how we agonized over not being able to open the chapters with song lyrics? Because
Yes.
we would both sit there and go, "Oh, this song right here, that would be perfect, just these two
Yes.
lines." And unless you're Stephen effing King or somebody that can
Yes.
afford it,
Yes.
they want to charge you like by the word or something like that for
Yep.
putting a quote in there.
Yep.
And the songwriter, whoever owns the mechanical rights to it, the printing company, the publishing company,
Mm-hmm.
it can take like tens of thousands of dollars
Yep.
just to put a quote from a song
Yep.
in there. And that, like you said, that's the music to our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We listen to that and
The soundtrack of
supported
our
those
lives.
artists and stuff. We should be able to put a quote in the book. I'm going to get
Yep.
indignant here.
Yeah. Well, I did. They haven't found it yet, because I did. I did. I can tell you right now, when I was writing, I remember when we did the book from ebook to print. And we added a couple of chapters because we wanted people to have extra. If they, had gotten the ebook and wanted to get the printed copy, they would
Yeah.
get a couple bonus chapters in there. And we did that. And we told the story about Cool Breeze, that wonderful
Yeah.
story about, the one that Steve got us involved in. And then I told the story about another motorcycle rider, who was my first husband, my son Jesse's dad. And everything that happened with him, and it was very much a similar story where multiple strangers had to get together with their gifts to help this man cross over. He was actually in this time. Everybody I talk to has a different name for it, so I'll just kind of describe it to you. It's a time where you're almost into a near-death experience where you're going into the light, but you don't want to go, and you're still fighting to stay in your body. You don't know whether you want to continue on or move forward. So you're kind of like literally in limbo. Eat a peach. Yes, Sir Brian. Absolutely. So there's so many wonderful people came through to help this man, because I knew he was angry. I knew if he hit the way he hit in a motorcycle accident, it was sudden, and he had immediate brain damage on top of it, that he was going to need assistance to get across. And I wasn't sure if I should tell the story. And then I stopped and I thought about it. I talked to Steve and I talked to some of the people that were involved. And I said, if I hold back the story, other people that need to hear it won't hear it. And that sounds, it's just so simple to say, but it's a profound statement. What if that story could help somebody else, right? So I put it in, and I was still, as I'm writing it, I wasn't sure. And so Danny used to sing this song to me all the time. Very, very into classic rock and roll. I mean, he was Doors, he was Led Zeppelin, he was, Allman Brothers. And but he had a couple that he really liked, and one was by Van Morrison, and it was called Into the Mystic. And he used to sing that to me because he called me his gypsy, and I had a gypsy soul. I always had to wander, and I was a free spirit. And he'd always sing that, "I want to rock your gypsy soul." It was just beautiful. That song is gorgeous. And as I'm writing the chapter, I just got off the phone with Steve. I said, "I'm going to do it, Steve." He said, "Go for it." And I'm writing the chapter, and the one motorcycle rider that's in our neighborhood, God bless him, goes by my door, my window, that I'm sitting there writing the book with the windows and the curtains blowing the breeze and stuff. It was really nice. A motorcycle goes by, and as he goes by, guess what song he's playing? "I Want to Rock Your Gypsy Soul." And he's singing Into the Mystic. There he goes, and I could hear it all the way as he went down the thing as I'm writing. And I'm like, and I put it in the book. And I said, well, I guess he wants me to say this story because guess what just went by my window? So little things like that. Those are huge moments in our life if we just stop and pay attention to them. Everybody can have these miracles. And again, don't let these songs be taken away from you, because I honestly believe that, these were young kids. I believe they were being manipulated just like they manipulate us. And some of the drug dealers and stuff like that, they knew what they were doing, no doubt. But I'm talking about the whole narrative of the movie. It was much bigger than these young people were. Some of them may knew a little more than others, I think. Steve, what do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's some plotting and planning there, and then I think sometimes people just like stuff. It just
Mm-hmm.
happens that way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is some kind of spell on it. Who knows? But that would account for certain things like Justin Bieber or Nickelback. But
Sir Bowden here. I'm glad that he said that, because he was one of them that helped with my husband. He said he was honored and happy to help. And I'm glad you were there, my friend. The amount of people that we know, Steve, with the talents and the gifts and the kindness and the love, I can tell you this. We are up against principalities. We are up against the unseen. We're up against evil. That's so hard for
and
good-hearted people to imagine how
it is,
evil
and
other people can
that
be.
evil exists. It's put here to do that to you. That's doing
Mm-hmm.
its job. It has an assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why things are hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Donnie Cha, I really don't like
He
Nickelback.
doesn't like
Well,
Nickelback.
and you know why? The main reason. You ever listen to Nickelback backwards?
Mm-hmm.
You hear it, and it's just like this full length album homage to Satan. But even worse, you play it forward, you hear Nickelback.
You hear Nickelback.
That'll never get old.
That'll never get old. I can remember once hearing my sons talking. This was like when eBay was just starting. I mean, if you can imagine back that far, we had one computer, and I really didn't pay much attention to it. It was all for silly stuff. But it imagine how big it got. It was crazy. But this was just in the new. It was just becoming, and they were talking about the I heard it on the internet, must be true kind of thing. And they said, well, every time a Nickelback song plays, a camel or a llama dies or something like that. And my son just looked at me and says, well, it was on the internet, must be true. And they had their own little giggle, but that was the first time I ever heard anything against Nickelback. I was like, well, so what's wrong with Nickelback? Why are people killing llamas? What's going on? Trying to figure out what's going on. But that's the big thing for tonight. And thanks, Sir Brian, for saying that. And again, he helped immensely. And I'll get him on one night. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. It's kind of touchy touchy for both of us, and it's highly personal. But again, the things we talk about on this show and the things that we put in the book and the things we put in our story, we put our whole heart and everything in there. And you think about it, well, people aren't going to like it. They're going to, this or that. I don't care about those people. I care more about the people that it helped by telling these stories and, opening your minds to some of these things going on. I had some idea of, this stuff in Laurel Canyon, but I had no idea how bad it was. And I figured the MK Ultra had something to do with it, because in my mind, they just moved that inner testing out to a larger testing group. And it was more than likely at the same time they're studying and doing experiments on military personnel, because I guarantee they ask you if you want to volunteer for this, we're going to volunteer for that. And some of the things you're reading, it's like it may cause death, may do that. No, I'm not volunteering for that. But all that stuff is going on.
Sign your enlistment papers.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you've already volunteered.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, when you're in there, the way they, that you're treated, and you're like more like government property. You can't get a tattoo. If you get a sunburn, you can get an Article 15 because they own your body, but they still ask you if you want to volunteer for this extra stuff. So I just never volunteered for anything, but I heard about people coming out of certain experiment things, and they weren't doing so good. And then working with vets coming out on this end of it, after the Middle East and everything else. And, the stuff that they're giving them right before they get out of the helicopter and stuff seems to be some kind of a mix of like an LSD, something to get you all charged up and ready to, basically just kill. And so it's definitely all entwined in there. It was definitely the number one thing was money, power, money, and making money on both ends of just about every war that I can see going back. And that's absolutely a fact.
Another kind of programming that was part of the MK Ultra experiment was they wanted to create a super soldier. If you had soldiers that didn't feel pain, that didn't need sleep, that could go days without food or water through sheer mind control, then think about how much better you could fight during warfare or whatever. If you didn't have human conditions to feel with. So that was. There's whole studies about that. There's a very interesting documentary on YouTube called Madness on the Motorway. It's about two twin sisters, or sisters, they may not be twins, that were on the motorway in the UK. And they think there was some kind of military mind control involved with that. Girl gets hit by a truck and gets up and wants to fight the cops.
You went out for a second, you popped back in and said he wants to fight the cops. That's all I got. Can you go back over that?
Yeah,
because who wants to fight the cops? What happened?
There's a really good documentary here on YouTube called Madness on the Motorway.
Okay.
About two sisters, or twins from Sweden, I think it was Sweden, that were in the UK for whatever reason. They just kind of up and went there. They were walking down the middle of one of the motorways there. One of them runs out in front of a truck and gets hit. Then they keep, no justice, no peace. That's what I'm talking about there. They keep jumping into oncoming traffic. The cops get there. One of them decks the cop and runs back into traffic.
Oh, wow.
And the one, they were only able to contain her because her legs were shattered. But otherwise, and there was conjecture or theory that they had undergone some sort of super soldier programming. The one, they let her out of the hospital. She was just wandering around the town. A military guy took her in, and I think he recognized that she was some sort of military asset or something. Probably tried to access her programming, and she murdered him. And then she went back outside, was smashing herself in the head with asphalt and bricks, and jumped off a bridge. And it's weird, but go watch it. It's Madness on the Motorway. Yeah, they call it a shared psychosis, but I don't care how psychotic you are. I don't think you can let a truck run over you and then get back up and want to fight.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I mean, that's woof. That's something else. Fro said he saw that. I have to check that one out. I hadn't seen that. I mean, I've seen. There's a couple things that were written about this, and then again, they're going to write movies about, like, there's a movie about Laurel Canyon. I guarantee you, they're doing that whole thing where it's organic. Like, you're supposed to believe the story that Steve just said. The one I heard Neil say not too long ago was about. It was a documentary from about 20 years ago. I think Neil still had a little something going on there. He's got soul, but he's still hanging in there. But he said that basically what Steve said, that he was leaving, coming into town, and Stephen and Crosby were leaving, and they just basically pulled over and said, "Well, we're gonna get together and do this." I mean, that was his actual talk on American Bandstand when they were interviewed. So I mean, it's almost like they had these stories already set out for them.
Mhm.
They didn't just show up and just start playing guitars and
Yeah,
mixing in together.
you'll just you see old
They're
Neil sitting there in
together.
Canada one day, like,
Yeah.
me and Steven Stills need to be in a band together. I'm going to drive 13 hours or 20 or whatever it was from where he was in Canada down to California, and then just happen to run into him as soon as I get to town, going the other direction on Hollywood Boulevard. So I'm going to
hmm
pull a U-turn in my hearse and get him to pull over and, hey, Steven, let's form a band. Okay, let's
And
do it.
how do you even know each other? One was in Canada. It
Well,
wasn't
I
like they were
think
set up.
in one of the earlier bands Steven had been in, I think they did do some shows together in Canada,
hmm
but it was just, some one offs or something like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't any big deal like that, but it was just all of a sudden that he got this lightning bolt in his head that I've got to be in a band with Steven Stills. So, maybe that was the government programming kicking in there that gave him
Could
that
have
thought.
been.
Who knows?
The horrible thing that they've done to people. I mean, from shock treatments to God only knows what's been going on in that lab. I mean, now it's closed down. Guess who owns it now? Jay
Jared
Leto.
Leto.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And it's,
And I
it's
believe
just
he
a
kept
tiny
it.
little place, too. It's
Yeah.
100,000 square feet.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, and this is just it's just all part of it, I think the murders, the ones that are left behind. I mean, they've made the Black Dahlia. That's all I have to say. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But you got to think about it. This person was cut up and hacked, and it was like Jack the Ripper kind of stuff.
Cut in
And there
half,
was multiple,
exsanguinated.
yeah,
Uh,
multiple
bathed,
people.
hair was freshly hinted, and then she was carried out to wherever she was placed in this field. So
And then
somebody
positioned,
took a
yeah.
lot of chances of being seen.
Absolutely.
Carrying
Right there
around
in the field.
a
Yep.
severed corpse in your car after first having, done all these things to her somewhere, then taking her out, positioning her in this lot, right
And
around daylight,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
been to that house where that's at. And back then, it was an empty lot. And I wonder if those people that live there know why people always show up in front of their house and
I don't know. I don't know
take
how you
pictures.
couldn't. I don't know how you couldn't
And
know.
how would
And
you
that's the
like
thing.
Dahlia been found in your front yard?
All through the canyon, all through there. Like, if you go through, like, you can go on YouTube and take like a riding tour through Laurel Canyon, and they'll take you. You can't even park. There's signs that says against the law to park on the side of the road. These roads are so thin, and most of the houses are, like I said, it's either got those wild steps that you have to go up, like a house on stilts, but most of them are so packed in there, you have to actually get on these like steel elevators to go up, like industrial little elevators to go up
Mhm.
into, where you get to the steps. That's how high up these things are. So you got a bunch of, all through the 60s, everybody's either on heroin or cocaine or pot or drunk or whatever they're doing, all in and out of each one of these houses. And then, the next day they're just going in and pulling out the bodies, it seems. I mean, literally, it seems like it was that bad. Women all cut up, thrown in the ditch, dead, dismembered over here. You've got, the list is so long, I couldn't put it on a roller so it would just roll for you, because the thing would have been like 20 minutes long, just rolling names and dates. And
Um,
so many dates for October 12th. So I don't know that much about all these different satanic holidays or numbered dates where, more sacrifices needed for this time or that. I just don't know all the different times. But October 12th has got to be something, because so many of these murders are, or supposed overdoses or supposed suicides, like the Phil Hartman, little scenario that you heard there, how the wife shot him and then shot herself. So many of those. October 12th. So I don't know what that is. Maybe between now and next week we can come up with that. I'd like to do the a little bit more in depth on the Wonderland murders, the Hillside Strangler, and the Four on the Floor and the Helter Skelter and La Bianca, and a little bit more about Manson and how he was through there. To listen to Neil Young sing his praises on how he was a fantastic writer. He said he wasn't the best singer, but he had talent. And Dennis Wilson loved him. So many people were singing his praises, and I mean, even Guns N' Roses recorded one of his songs, and I think another band, yeah, it's incredible. And then here he is. The next thing you know, he's being portrayed, and probably rightfully so, as this gang leader kind of thing that took in all these unwanted people and gave them this loving family, and they just lived to serve him. I've heard more in depth on how he was a little bit more connected, and possibly they were a separate test subject to see how far that they could push. And I'd like to get into that next week. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. A couple of questions here. Brown Dwarf,
Go
I
ahead.
believe it was Wilcox and I believe Norton. It's near Limerick Park. I've been by there. There's a house there now. And somebody else had asked something here. Oh, be kind had asked the name again of the person that owns the Lookout movie studio place. It's Jared Leto, Leto, not Jay Leno.
Yeah, Leto. Yes, actually, yep. Yep. Well, there you have it, guys. Pretty interesting stuff. I don't know what their whole agenda was. You can only guess. But like I said, next week I'm trying to work this week, get you a couple clips of. I'd love for you to hear it out of David McGowan's mouth, because he did some great little interviews, and I'd like to cut a couple there, and he gives his opinion on what he thinks it is. But again, think again. This man he went through the whole publishing thing where he was done. He had to send it out, and they put the pictures and put it all together. He was so excited to get this just out on the road, promoting this new book, and gets a phone call that says, "Watch out for cancer's dead 3 months later." So whatever was going on there that they wanted to keep secret, somebody still wants to keep it on the down low, huh, Steve?
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's like a couple of years ago. I read about somebody that was doing research into the Lincoln assassination, and they started getting death threats. I mean, that's
Incredible.
pretty deep cover there for something that happened, what, 120
Yeah.
something years ago or whatever. There's
100,
still
yeah.
people that want
Yeah.
you to be quiet about it.
Pushing 160, yeah.
Before we go, shameless self promotion here.
Go
Just want
ahead.
to plug my new book.
Oh,
It's actually the release date is tomorrow, but I looked. It's already available on Amazon. I put a thing of the cover there in the chat or on the screen. If you could put that on screen for me, Cisco.
say it again where you got it, sweetie. Let me find it.
Should be next
I
to my
got you.
picture in the bottom there. Just pop that on the screen.
Woo,
There you go.
look at that.
Mastercard Mysteries and Disappearances, Volume 3, the Pacific Northwest, Oregon,
Fantastic.
Washington,
Congratulations,
Idaho.
my friend.
Thank you. 142 pages, I think, of fun. Lots of ghost stories, unsolved murders, unsolved disappearances, available now in paperback and Kindle on Amazon. Like I said, the actual release is tomorrow, but I checked and it's there now. So
That's fantastic.
go check me
So
out.
proud
If
of
you
you,
read
honey.
it, like it, leave a
Beautiful.
review for me. Thank you.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, I've got to tell you how those reviews help. I had one really bad one, it was 1 star. When we first put out the ebook, Steve and I were so tired that we mixed up chapters. Some were fixed and some weren't. So, like, for 3 days, we had the ebook up there. We had all these chapters all messed up. We had gone back, we checked the first, the middle, and the back. But there was like 3 chapters in, one was really messed up. So this guy got a hold of it and just ripped me a new one. And I'm like, I'm fine with that. Just leave me an honest review. You like it, you don't like it. But by then the book had already been pulled and fixed and re-put up as an ebook and then done as a print. And of course the print book was so different. It had extra stuff in it and everything. But it really does take, I must have, I don't know, maybe 15, 16, maybe more 5-star reviews, and it still goes down as 4 because that one guy, 1 star,
That
it
one
really
guy.
stinks. That stinks. But you know what? It's just so great to hear people reading it, and I appreciate it so much. Like I said, we wrote it to try to help people who've had experiences, just trying to understand. Basically, Steve and I are just trying to understand what we experienced too. We're still throwing ideas at each other. Maybe this happened like a couple weeks ago. We were just thinking about that little boy you saw. Might have been in the trunk of the car, or something happened attached
Yeah,
to the
that
car
that
somehow.
that
You know,
hadn't even, or it was a
I
glitch
hadn't
in
even
time.
thought about that
That
glitch
hadn't
in time.
occurred to me until
Yeah,
recently.
all these different things, and all of it is possible. It doesn't mean anybody's right or wrong. It just means that we're all just trying to figure this out, just like tonight. You know, I mean, again, I don't want to take anything away from the wonderful music and stuff like that, but I can tell you, Hotel California is realer than you think. And you'd probably, not be too thrilled to be there because you might not be able to check out. So, I mean, there really is a lot of truth to this stuff. But again, if we learn what they did to us in the past, maybe in the future we won't be so easily, we'll be able to pick out a little bit more of the signs, because they keep repeating the same thing over and over and
Yeah.
over again. And if we learn from our past and learn from history, we won't be destined to repeat it, like George Santayana said. So
And
thank
that's,
you all so much. Go
I
ahead.
just want to say, and that seems to be part of it. They like putting it in your face. They like
Yes.
their numerology and
Yep.
their signs and their little signatures letting you know it was them. That's hiding in plain sight. And
Absolutely. And I think they get a little something too if you're talking about someone is dealing with severe, I mean, the real black magic and
mhm,
everything else. It seems strange to think about this, but they think that if they tell you about it first and you did nothing to stop it, they don't have to deal with the karma of it. And their karma is a little bit different. What they believe in theirs is a little bit different. It's more like universal energy. It won't come back on them. And I don't know how true that is. It doesn't matter if I believe it, they believe it, and they still keep sticking it in our faces, and we keep letting them do it. So,
yeah.
like I said, we'll open our eyes and we'll see. And next week we'll talk a little bit more about the in depths and all of the ins and outs. I don't know
And
if
I
you guys.
promise, Donnie, that we'll get to
Oh yeah,
Jimmy Page and Aleister Crowley and the connection there.
there you
And
go.
Glenn Dennison said, "We destroyed my childhood, but great info." LOL.
Well, I was listening to one today. I think it was a Crosby, Stills and Nash that came up, and I am looking at the lyrics a little bit, different and stuff like that. But you know what? It's you can't take away the good memories that they were a part of. And in my mind, that's like taking. It's not like the music was bad. It was what was going on around them was bad, whether they knew about it or not. Again, they could very well have been unwilling victims in this too, or just manipulated and still don't have a clue. I mean, my God, they were all heads blown out with drugs anyway. So, I mean, I have, whole decades that I can barely remember. So, I mean, it's stuff like that happens. So, maybe if we just let go and look at the aspect of the whole thing and not let it destroy the memory of the music, that way we could turn a dark to a light, and we can still sing along with the music and enjoy our memories, not theirs. Right, Steve?
Right, right, right. Because
There it is.
there's parts of that they could never change. I mean, the first time you heard that song and what you're
Hmm.
doing, that'll always be there, even if something terrible happened too.
Hmm.
And the other things I hope everybody takes away from tonight, the one word: discernment.
Yes.
Discernment. And remember that, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Remember that. It's not us against us. It's not us against them.
Hmm.
It's all of us
Principalities.
against whatever that is out there.
Hmm.
So,
And it's a big group. It's a big group of evil people out there. And I think one of the things that I have the most people that tell me is, they just can't wrap their head around how somebody could be that evil. I said, because you're not, but you have
mhm.
to understand that there are people that are, and there are some that are sick or psychopath and stuff like that. It's just different. And it's the
And
way they were raised. So
that
it's
type
just
of
different.
evil, yeah, it begets evil. It
Yeah.
tends to run in families, generational. I
Hmm.
couldn't tell you how many of those people
Bloodlines.
here that are involved in things like that. It's a bloodline. It's a
Hmm.
generational thing.
Yep.
Their dad was in it. Their grandmother, their great grandparents, their great
Hmm.
great great grandparents.
And they always think that
on.
what they're doing is so important. Think Nazi. They're so important that they have to find this out for the greater good. So that statement right there has caused more death and more damage and more pain and more crippling disease or effects of a pharmaceutical drug or whatever. But it's the same thing as in war. Is that a reasonable amount of casualties to expect for the outcome that we want? And in every war room in any country since the beginning of time, the answer would be that's an acceptable amount of damage, collateral damage, to have for this outcome. And that's the way they think too. So, all these kids jumping off of buildings and ODing and sticking needles in their arms and ruining families and people in the ditches and God knows what else happening, helter skelter and stuff like that, ritual killings, whatever reason, they don't care. But we do care. And therein lies the difference, because we still have those human aspects. We still have compassion. We have compassion for each other. And we can take this darkness and turn it into a light just by putting it out in the light. And then, like Steve said, discernment. So there you go. Next week, we'll get in a little bit more into the Wonderland murders and everything else. And we'll definitely get into Donnie's question. That's all you, Steve, because I don't dabble in the Aleister Crowley and the Jimmy Page stuff.
Oh, I know some good stuff about that one.
It's going to be awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for all the super chats. I can't tell you how much we appreciate, you reading our books and listening to our stuff. We're just a couple old people here that like to talk about stories and laugh a lot and love each other. So we appreciate you being here for that too. Thank you, my friend Steve. That beautiful book covers. You're doing great. This is what, the fourth? Is this the fourth one now?
The third in that series.
The third in that series. My goodness. All right, you guys. If they keep messing up like this, we'll forever have stories to tell, Steve. So let them rip. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Love you all.
Have a good one.
See you at midnight on my channel.
There you go. Go catch Steve.
Midnight Eastern on 13 past midnight.
Y'all be kind to each other. Keep your feet under the covers. Keep your closet door shut, because there are things that go bump in the night. And don't play your records backwards. It's bad for the needle. Good night, everybody.
Good night.